Andy here. It's Monday. Ooh, I think it's the 16th. Is it 16th today? 17th? Might be the 17th. December. Just a bit of an intro into the next video of down the virtual pub. Recorded it last night. Really cool. Again, had no idea who was going to come in, if anyone was going to come in at all. But I was joined by 1LV again, and thank you very much 1LV for coming on. That was really great. What a lovely conversation we had. Really took it to some really interesting places, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And also we were joined by Ivan. Thank you so much for coming on. New member, welcome. I'm glad you come on. What a great conversation we all had. 1LV had to pop off a bit later on, but we carried on the conversation. Went deep. Pretty great subjects we went into. I love this. I really do love it, because there's no real agenda. We just talk about what people want to talk about when they come on, and it really pushes me to think. I'm learning all the time. I'm definitely learning on how I want to be on these podcasts. It's all a learning curve, but we all learn together, and it's great. And I can't thank you enough. Thank you for everybody supporting the channel. It's amazing. It's growing. It's 1 minute we're at 800 subscribers, then it drops down again. And then we're back up to 800 again. So that's really cool. Thank you for everyone that promotes it, supports it. And what a year it's turned in. I'm looking forward to next year. Be interesting to see where we go with it all. But thank you everyone. Next week we're going to do a bit of a Christmas special, and I'm thinking of opening it up to all subscribers. That'll be interesting. I don't know how that's going to work, but hey ho, it might be a bit of a giggle if anything, but we'll have a bit of fun. And no, seriously, thank you so much for all the support, everybody. I wish you all well, and sit back, enjoy. This one's a long one again, but enjoy it. Take care. Bye. Right, here we go.
Well, I hope it's a good surprise. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Not
your
too
week,
bad at all.
all good?
What have you been up to?
Not much. Still here, lost in the French Alps, as usual.
What's the weather like?
It's been snowing quite a lot finally.
Has it?
Yeah, that's quite cool for skiing and snowboarding.
I was going to say, is it a place where you can
Yeah,
do
totally.
plenty of... Oh, right, really nice. Would it get busy as well?
It's starting to get busy, yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
God, you
Which
miss
is kind of good, I think, because it's been a long period full of nothing, actually. It's like literally, I think I told you there's just one bar around the corner. When they close, it's quite a lonely place.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Always reminds me. What was that film with Jack Nicholson? Oh, crikey.
The
The
Shining?
Shining. Yeah. It's not like that, is it?
No, I hope not.
Yeah, it's a spooky film, that was. Spooky film. But good film.
Yeah. I really like the conversation that you had last week with Camel. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it because I had some friends over, which was great. But I would have loved to join the conversation, particularly the parts about aliens. That was good.
I know, it's really strange, isn't it? It's that's what I love about. I mean, I've known Camel for a while, and we have like these different conversations sometimes. Not I don't record it or anything, but it's what I loved about last week. I had no idea that's where I was going to go. No idea, and it just evolved into spiritual, aliens, universe, different, and I love all that. I find it really interesting, and obviously he does. But what is really weird, he brought. I know. Do you follow him on Twitter?
Yeah.
Because he pinned a post about aliens a week or two ago, didn't he? Maybe
I didn't see that.
3 weeks ago. I don't know what the pin was, or the pin tweet was. But he had something about aliens, and then we had that conversation last week, which was like really way out there, but bloody fascinating. And then on my YouTube feed, all I've seen is stuff about oh crikey, drones and bits and pieces in America.
Okay.
Have you seen anything?
No, to be honest, this particularly this week I've been quite busy, so I didn't really see anything. But yeah, I mean, I think from the conversation you had last week, from the bits that I saw, I guess I think Camel said that he would somehow expect something to pop up somewhere between now and March, and I find this interesting. I always see it a little bit as a distraction,
Yeah,
for what is actually going on, what is actually should be important for everyone. But then, I mean, there is a particular kind of other level to that, which, if you want to call it spiritual, or somehow, the mere fact that there might be something out there that we just don't know yet, or at least I don't, that that is just so powerful that I was really like, when I was listening to him talking, I thought like, yeah, it's true. I mean, if there's one thing that would basically stop the world right now, I guess,
yeah.
would be if just like the 24th of December, instead of Christmas, we celebrate the new arrival of the Lord from outer space.
I know it's not until you actually sit there and think about it, and obviously because you're into your Bitcoin and bits and pieces, aren't you?
Yeah,
It takes you down all these weird rabbit holes, but I always find there's a soul understanding that sits really, for me personally, sits really inside of me that sort of joins in with that whole why has Bitcoin appeared? Why is this happening? Why is that happening?
yeah,
Are we due? Oh, I know Campbell talks about cycles and bits and pieces, and that's just a complete interesting phenomenon the way that works. But it seems to work. Is that a universal thing going on? It just really makes you, if you're that way inclined, or that moment of time in your life that you want to explore, it really brings all the dots, and it makes you try and connect stuff up, and it's just a bit weird at the moment,
yeah,
and it just feels right.
yeah,
Feels
yeah.
right for
I
something
think
to happen. Sorry.
I think that the cycle theory in general I find fascinating, because it's somehow, I see it a little bit as a like, I don't know if you want to call it vibration, or it's just everything. Like, particularly when you look at charts, when you look at people buying and selling things, assets, then it's just normal that this has to somehow fluctuate, and there has to be some sort of pattern there, like anything else in nature. It's just normal human behavior. And so if you then sometimes have, events that impact the markets, and then you have a little bit of a deviation of a particular expectation or a particular setup in the cycles, yeah, I understand. But then this is somehow getting compensated somewhere else. It's literally like, I imagine it a little bit like, when you just look at the sea, like you see the waves coming in,
Sure.
and they overlap each other, and
Sure.
they form new waves within the waves.
Yes.
And it's a little bit like that. So it's very difficult to predict, like, how the waves will really look at all time points. But it's not that surprising that if you already see a wave that is forming, that you can then say, okay, the next wave might overlap with this and yield something that I already have seen before. And so
Mm.
these kind of movements, in terms of, even like energetically speaking, any molecule, anything has like some sort of vibration. And since we all consist out of molecules, it's, to me, this is just super logical. I think I just actually discovered this with Camel, like maybe now, a bit more than a year ago, I guess.
Mm.
And but since then, I particularly also, I really like Kemosabe's. I think, I mean, he's always talking about Elliott wave a lot, but then he always says he's evolved from that. And but when I follow his channel as well, and when I see what he does, it's like, literally, like, he looks at patterns, and how they, and the symmetry of those patterns. So that is basically what I'm just trying to explain, right? Because you basically have again these waves that somehow might overlap, and they create some sort of, in some cases, probably also symmetries. And if you get experienced, like when you play a lot of chess, then you start seeing like formations and what you could do, and it's the same. It must be the same. I don't have this type of experience, but it must be the same for people that have been doing this for a decade or longer. They just start to see things that other people just don't have the experience to see it.
Totally makes 100% sense to me. Because I think I might have been talking about it last week. I'm early in the game. I've only been in it for 3 years almost, but I come from an engineering background, and I'm always looking for patterns in things for my job. It's always interested me, and people's behaviour always interested me. And you can almost see patterns. Well, they're everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And the interesting thing is I think from my personal point of view, is it's not until I start to observe, then you start to see. But if you're not prepared to try and observe something, then you will never see it. But then that
Yeah.
means that pattern was there anyway.
Mm.
So it kind of make like with the wave thing when you was talking, it's the I can either see that wave within a wave or in another wave, but if I don't want to see it, it's still there.
Yeah. Yeah,
It,
that's something that I found super interesting because
mm,
I think we touched upon this, I think the first time that I joined this podcast where Camel, I think he believes that if there's nobody to experience, or I think he says if there's no consciousness, like you need consciousness for something to be.
yeah,
So, and I agree to a certain extent because obviously, I mean, if there's no consciousness, if there's nobody to see or to hear the tree falling in the woods, then
sure.
yeah, then does it really exist at all?
Mm,
But I think I don't know. It's a very tough conversation, obviously, because none of us can really know what happens if there's no consciousness, I guess. But then maybe he has some insights that I don't understand. It's just for me, to what you said, I see it rather from maybe I can compare it to something that I'm more familiar with, and that's like maybe different cultures. So you might see certain patterns, you as an engineer somewhere where other people that don't have your background, they don't see it, but that doesn't mean that they're not there.
yeah,
And people that have maybe lived in different countries and grown up with different, exposed to different cultures, then they might see patterns in how people are and behave on a not only on a personal level but also culturally influenced that other people cannot grasp because they don't. It's really difficult. It's like I've never been to China. I cannot grasp the cultural like richness of something that happens or that is told, a story that might be told to children in China. I cannot grasp it. Like literally, it's beyond me. But I might be. I was born in South America and in the country where I was born in Ecuador. Then this is super easy for me because obviously your parents are from the same place, and even though you might grow up somewhere else and then live somewhere else and then again somewhere else, you can still somehow combine all these patterns and see that, and that is pretty much I think what you meant, right?
yeah, for sure. It is difficult to have that conversation because sometimes I don't know how to express what I'm really deeply feeling at a level to someone that maybe could understand what I'm trying to say, if that
Mm.
makes sense. And I think we can all get a little bit lost in that sometimes. But it's really interesting because, like, when Carol was talking last week about the double split, is it the double split experiment in
Mm.
physics?
Yeah, I think he's got this type of he's I think he studied chemistry,
Yeah,
but he always mentions that he's got this particular background in some
science.
type of, yeah, no, but some type of I think quantum physics or something. He
Yeah,
always mentions that he
yeah,
had like some friends and early in his during university they realized that. And I would really like to talk to him about this in more detail because I mean I actually originally I studied molecular biology, but I've never gotten, I have to admit, I've never gotten this kind of insight, or I never really, I know there's so many rabbit holes
Yeah.
that you can dive into, but I think what he means, we would, if he comes on the call or something, we can somehow ask him a couple of more specific questions because I'm a bit lost sometimes. He's kind of, I'm not sure if I don't intentionally a little bit more vague because maybe he doesn't want to go into too much detail for some reason. Like I don't know, maybe if we ask him, he shares it in a more, I don't know, let's say, so that but the people that didn't study that also understand it. I don't know if you have the same feeling, or maybe you understand it completely, and I'm just like, it's just me.
For sure. I don't understand I love I love the challenge of trying to listen to the context of what someone's trying to express. And then my challenge I always find is how I can receive that information,
Mm.
which sometimes can be a little bit more challenging for me. But the art of it is to have that conversation, isn't it? And to try and hopefully have that conversation that allows, or the conversation allows us to be able to receive the information at the level of how we can receive it, which is,
Yeah, and also to grow. I mean, in
yeah,
general, I think that is what it's all about. I guess, I don't know, at least for me, talking about stuff that is way out there is mostly for me an incentive to learn and to somehow grow and understand. Maybe talk about something with people that like to share, that I don't actually even know or understand at all or have never thought of.
yeah, for sure. And what I liked about, I mean, what I really liked about last week was, when we both mentioned that we both feel somehow that something's about to happen. We're going to go through that big change, and then obviously that come out with aliens for him. And I'm not 100% sure what I feel could happen, but I do feel that we as a species we are ready to experience something different, and whether that lands around the, have you heard of the fourth turning?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, whether it all lands around that, because, excuse me, definitely our money system, which is why we all know each other, is changing.
Mm.
It needs to change, and we seem to be at that point. But it's just fascinates me that what's going to be that tipping point, and is it going to be really painful, not painful?
Mm.
Is there really something going on between good and evil? I know they're words, but you know what I
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah.
Is there going to be this change that maybe humanity needs, and what's going to be the catalyst to really change it?
Mm.
And I think that's how that conversation sort of come out last week.
Yeah.
But I think everyone feels it.
Yeah, I agree, and I think to a certain extent, I'm not really, I don't know. I think there's a lot of overuse of the word awareness in that context, like that awareness is growing, and I'm not sure. I have the feeling that it's a little bit diluted by now, and it's kind of used sometimes in contexts where I'm not entirely sure if people understand what it actually means, but I think that's a little bit what you're aiming at, right? So I I do agree that I have the feeling in my surroundings that there's there's this general move towards wanting to understand and to experience and to feel what it feels like to live without this chronic and almost apathic, or yeah, this disconnect to reality, because it's unbelievable that we live in a time, in a place and time where we can watch things on social media, on TV, and that happen that are incredibly like dark, and we can still somehow go to work next day and everybody pretends that nothing is happening when actually deep inside, if you want to call it the child inside yourself or whatever your entity is, that somehow is kind of screaming at you, actually everybody should just stop doing whatever everybody's doing, and we should just first figure out how to not kill each other. And
Yeah,
then and I wonder sometimes, how people that have children, that have particularly very young children, how they justify this in front of the children, and also in the future how they will say, yes, and that time when this happened in that world you were born, I was, I don't know, in my mid 30s or mid 40s or mid 50s, and I absolutely, as a grown up, grasped and understood very well what was going on. And if they ask you, then the children, when they're grown up, they ask you, what did you do? Like, what did you think? Why didn't you say anything? What was your reaction? And then you just literally say, I don't know, I didn't like. How is this then a situation like, I don't know, where people can escape just by saying, I didn't know, or I did know, but I didn't think it's that bad? Or, how do you deal with yourself when you are, it's kind of like judgment day, where you have to kind of explain, to yourself as well, like what does it do to your soul or to you as an entity? Like you have to face this very long detachment from reality, this detachment from what is actually what what you need to somehow, you know your child to understand. Or would you just go a different way and just say, look, child, this is how the world works. The world in that context is not good, and you have to learn that, and that's that. Which is also kind of dark and a bit sad, but maybe that's also a way to go. I don't know if that's actually really true, but yeah, these things just remind me always of the fact that I don't know, we're just very detached from what I believe reality is, and I think this will somehow come back. And if we don't uh, kind of make this step towards being more and more aware of it and work with it and on it, then I'm not sure if that's going to be a nice situation to have.
while you're talking there, I was just you know, sitting about my children, thinking about them, and they're all grown up now. Um, one of them's actually got their own children.
Mhm.
So it's fascinating because I was sitting there thinking while he was talking, I was thinking, how would I be now? And that's that's a hypothetical question because it's not going to be reality. I've had my I've had my time when the children were young, but putting that to one side, I do often cast my eye back, and I always look at when I reflect on how I brought my children up or how I was a part of bringing my children up. I always reflect on how I was as a person, as a parent. How did I feel? How was my life? And I presume most people that have children, ultimately, you become very protective of them, and you probably surround them in a bit of cotton wool from the stuff that we've experienced. But when he was talking, I was just sitting back and thinking, how bad was my day to day, you know? And to be honest with you, my day to day, yeah, was not, was pretty well protected. The hamster wheel life that I was living, going to work, earning some money, living in the money bubble of the 80s and 90s and the 2000s. Life wasn't too, that was your normal anxious moments, but because the money was not so much of an issue, as long as you was prepared to work and whatever, the money side of it just sort of followed you. Whereas now, I look at my children, especially with my daughter, having a son of her own. I think, oh wow, how would I be now? Is there more pressure on younger people today where they find it increasingly difficult to be able to wrap their younger children up in cotton wool when they're facing issues themselves that I didn't have to face because of, there was a bit more of a comfort zone in the
Mm.
world. But it just seems like what you were saying, it seems so up the wall now that even maybe that's why people aren't thinking about having families now. They're not comfortable enough. There's too much going on. There's too much uncertainty. There's too many questions that people are thinking, what's really going on here? This doesn't make sense. Politics, everything that's going on. So yeah, it's a really interesting time. Very interesting time indeed.
It's interesting that you say this because I had this conversation once with my parents actually,
Mhm.
and the question was initially directed at me, just asking, kind of in general, what's wrong with people in that generation that are probably now in the mid 30s, and and I was somehow surprised, and eventually the conversation ended up in, I think, them for the first time understanding that at least in Europe, because this also depends a lot on where on this planet you live and grow up. But I think that probably if I hear you talking like in the 80s and 90s, I don't know, there must have been some kind of a little bit of a different expectation to life. And if you say, the money would just follow you, I'm sure this is great. If that was the case, I'm sure that there were also people with financial troubles in the
Yeah,
80s and 90s. But I have the feeling like at least the argument that I was trying to build was that I think that people now already for the last 10 years in that age range, they just confronted with the situation that they might not actually even, it doesn't matter how much they work in their life, they might not be able to buy a house or have their own kind of have just what the generation before them had. And
massive.
and so if your parents don't have enough money to somehow support you to, I don't know, for some sort of down payment for to buy an apartment or something, then literally, I mean, you don't have to be an Excel sheet hero to understand that it's gonna be quite tough,
Yeah,
particularly if you live in places like London or I don't know, New York, Paris, and so I just think that eventually what I was trying to kind of describe is that it must be a lot of frustration that these people feel because frustration and maybe even, I don't know, anger or somehow confusion. And then because there is this expectation from the generation, from the previous generation to say just as much as not in a mean way or in a not to put pressure on your children, but actually at the contrary, I think more because as you said, like you want to protect your children and you want them to be well off, like you want them to be okay, and so you say, okay, I work that hard to give them education or give them that, and then why do they not somehow fulfill, what they were fulfilled, what they were supposed to do?
yeah,
And I see this somehow also. I try to see this at least in many different countries, like different kind of when I say different, I mean, for example, just a very tangible example, like sometimes for Christmas when we were younger, my brother and I were like always super happy when cousins of mine when they came to visit us in Europe, and so obviously from a very early age you realize, oh, but for people that do not live in Europe, like that are not part of the European Union, it's actually from some countries very difficult, even if they just want to have a tourist visa, which most of the people that, at least, I don't know, in Central Western Europe, you don't even think about this. You just say, like, I want to go to Thailand.
yeah,
Do you need a visa or not? I don't know. Let's figure out when we get there.
Mm.
And then you see that the whole this other reality, this process where your parents might have to write like an official letter to so that they can present this at the embassy, so they might be rewarded or somehow awarded a tourist visa, and then they have to obviously pay the ticket, the flight before, which is a huge risk because if you just get if you don't get the visa, then you basically spent like a lot of money in relative terms
Mhm.
for nothing. And so looking at these type of realities, I always wondered, like, things that we see, like even particularly actually in financial terms, access to financial tools, to financial products as well, that are extremely important in terms of, or extremely efficient in terms of your financial investments. Other people, in other countries, they just don't have that access, or that easy access. And what does that actually mean exactly in that context of that conversation about the reality that we perceive, when we even speak to each other, you and me? I'm in Europe, you're in the UK. But I don't know, I think maybe somebody in some other place would just say like, wow, I don't even know what it means to not work. Like I need to make this hamster wheel turn as fast as possible, because otherwise there's just no other way I can. And then there's no time to actually have these thoughts, or and obviously, I mean, I've heard from the conversation that you had with Camel that these things don't happen just by coincidence. Like I'm 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 more and more convinced that this is actually, this is there for a reason, because if everybody suddenly had time to think about these kind of things, then the What podcast would be really, really full, which would be great. But then also things would, I don't know, change very quickly, I think.
It's 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 really interesting because during your conversation, it seems like you've got so many things that you're exploring in your mind. Would that be right?
Yeah, it's very difficult to keep like a structured conversation
Yeah.
when your mind is that dispersed. So I apologize when maybe I'm kind
No,
of like,
no. Don't apologize. It was just an observation because I'm the same. Camel's the same. Probably everyone that ever comes on here will all be the same because we're all attracted by the same thing. We've all got. I think that like-minded people are starting to get together because they're for so long you can sit like a mushroom in the dark with your own thoughts,
yeah,
and it's very difficult to express those thoughts because probably 95% of the population, including me in that, as a rule, we're so wrapped up on that hamster wheel, we don't get time. And the only time we get is when we try to go to sleep at night. And that can either allow us to go to sleep because we're so tired, or if the mind starts to kick in, we don't get to sleep that much.
yeah.
So,
And also what you mentioned the last time, I think that you actually, in order to get out of the wheel, this is a process in itself. This
yeah.
is, I think you were talking about this, which I found super interesting, that, just sit down for like 2 months doing nothing, like let alone 2 years, like not nothing, but, trying to kind of like figure out, who am I? What am I? Like, what if I don't have to work ever again? What am I going to do with my life? That is a process in itself.
Mm.
Like trying, so it's not that simple. It's really actually something that is I don't know how to say this, but it's kind of it's a very difficult task in the nothingness of the existence somehow, to kind of understand what is it actually, what I truly am. What do I today? I wake up and I want to be happy because I just am. I don't need to I just exist, and that's fine. So I'm going to the mountains, and when I come back, I did nothing that, maybe an important person who is the VP of some great company, they would see this as a waste of time. But maybe you just, I don't know, took a loaf of bread and brought it to somebody, and that was all you did during that day, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And that sounds very simple, but if you do live like this, that transition is super difficult. it's very difficult to not fall into this type of, you know, circular thoughts where you say, "Oh my God, what have I done with my life?" Or no, maybe I should have, I don't know, jumped into this new job where I would have this now. How much would I've earned, and how would my life be? And maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe I made a big mistake. I should, like, all these thoughts that just you have to go through this. And I think this is something that usually people don't realize, and it's pretty intense conversation you have with yourself.
You do, and it's. I've talked to, funny enough, I was talking to Camel off air afterwards, after last week,
Mm.
and he was saying he actually said to me, he said, because he was like laughing a little bit, just saying, "Oh, that was a little bit out there, wasn't it?" And we both said, "Yeah, it was." Don't know where that went, but in true reality, he turned around and said, "He said, I think we'd both be surprised that people want this conversation." And I sat there and I thought to myself, "Yeah, he's probably right, you know, because if I feel like I want the conversation, obviously listening to you, you sound like you want that conversation. Camel, you know, definitely enjoys that conversation. So other people will want that conversation. So it doesn't seem so wacky, way out there, whatever people want to call it. After all, it's it goes to show that I don't know whether you believe in energy and all that sort of thing as a collective conscious thing within the universe. Maybe it's just that time that a certain amount of people need to kick off. You know, not sit as mushrooms in the dark anymore. Have places to confidently have these conversations
Mm.
in a nice way, and then start to express ourselves, and then maybe, just maybe, and that's what I'm hoping to do with this podcast, just maybe it may give people the opportunity to realize that from, depending on the way you've been brought up, but if you've gone through the whole process of education and schooling and, you know, all that, nowadays your parents are even more busier, so maybe time is even more, you know, difficult to give your children, then maybe we need to maybe just understand that we we need to change. We need to change that concept that the hamster wheel, that everything that I've ever learned right from a young lad isn't necessarily the real virtues of how we live our life. You know, like you said, you know, it's okay to do nothing. It's okay to experience giving someone a loaf of bread, or just saying hello to someone, or just giving someone the time of day. It's okay.
Mm.
That's okay. That's who we are, really. But I think we've become so far detached from that now, that's, I think it's starting to rear its ugly head, and people are starting to look to say like, no, I don't want to be this person on the hamster wheel all the time. They're pressurized too, maybe, you know, if they've got big responsibilities, and they're, you know, down that route from an early point in life, or even still at it after 40 years. But people need that outlet. They just need to know that we're just, we need to try and get back who we are as a
Mm.
species, and then try to hopefully get that back into the next generation and the next generation. And what I'm hoping for, I'm rabbiting a little bit, sorry. And what I'm hoping for
Oh.
is this, you know, the finance system is going to change to help that process. That's what I'm hoping is going to happen, you know, with Bitcoin and, you know, everything that's going on in the financial world now, that we really get to know that fiat has run its time, and maybe we do need a new system, and, you know, to help us become human beings again, to help us come to this planet and live a life that isn't just so dull,
Mm.
pressurized, and just, I don't know, I'd say boring, but it's gone too far there. I'm not living my life the way I want to live it stage. It's like being caged now.
Uh,
It's like being trapped in some sort of, I know people talk about the Matrix, but it's
yeah.
not like the film or in a simulation. It's being
Um,
totally trapped.
I actually just saw I don't know, it's like, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, I saw a video about the new virtual reality. I think Apple and Google and they all have like their new products, and it's
Yeah,
just crazy because it made me really think about the Matrix and how, basically once you connect to this and it makes it's designed to be so addictive, and it's not super expensive anymore, and really heavy, because most of the people I've seen in this review just complaining about their neck because they say you cannot work like this after an hour. And so all of these things you can figure out, like that's just a matter of time. And then there will be a day where I'm sure, just like with the phone, where people will just connect to this and they will just disappear from real world. Like literally the real world will might be in there. And if you're not in there, then you might actually be cut out. Or even worse, it's so addictive and so enticing to just be in there that nobody wants to be out anymore. And that's something that's kind of as a response to what you just said. That's at sometimes I have, positive days where where I think, yeah, no, I think there is some change, and maybe I don't really believe that the financial system itself will change drastically, because there might be some kind of initial, like, let's say, like some what is can be perceived as corrective move.
yeah.
But then I think it's just going to be somehow coerced and somehow integrated, or it's just kind of, it's going to be made to fit again into as overall context where people that have the power anyway to just maintain that, or it shifts. That would be even worse in my opinion. It would shift the power to people that initially had good intentions, and just because of the nature of what it does to you once you have the power, that they would then, the big Bitcoiners that wanted to, potentially, I'm just freestyling here. I don't think that this is, I have no evidence that this will happen,
That's
but
fun.
that people would then just in 50 years say, yeah, I was like one cypherpunk, but now, now it's my turn. Now I bought in Bitcoin early and Ethereum, and so now I'm rich and I have to say. And that's, basically, I don't know, that there are some days where I'm more positive and some other days where I just think like I see this virtual reality cam like headsets and I just think like, Jesus, I don't know, I just hope that that's not going to be my reality in which I have have to live, because that, I don't know if that's going to be a sad story.
It certainly will be. I, I really struggle with this question myself in my own mind. And I, at some point, we have to trust other people. It, it, it's pretty difficult nowadays because, like within Bitcoiners, it's trust nobody, verify everything. And I have a tendency, and I'll be very open about it. I've found myself the more I've gone down the rabbit hole of the whole finance system, the social media system, what I like, what I don't like. I finding myself that I've very, very. It's sorry. I, I find myself quite often hardly trusting anything now that I see or hear, other than what I could experience in a physical level. So that's a challenge. That's a real challenge. That keys into what you were saying, like about I hope it doesn't happen. Now, I listened to a podcast today. Have you heard of a guy called Jeff Booth?
No.
No, really, really interesting guy. Talking about Bitcoin, talks about Bitcoin, I said to my wife during dinner, I said, while I'm decorating at home, doing a bit of painting, and I was listening to it, which one of the greatest things about having YouTube and whatever, you can listen to stuff while you're
Yeah.
doing whatever. And I was listening to it and I thought, oh my good grief, this guy's really. I needed to listen to this particular podcast. Obviously, for some reason, I was meant to, because all of a sudden I've realized that we still have to trust something if we want definitely a better community, a better set of global communities. At some point, we have to trust in something. Now,
Mm.
I think it's pretty easy to say that most of us don't really trust the fiat currency system.
Which is normal because I think, how would you trust something that just can be created mainly from the country that produces it because they have the
Exactly.
world
Yeah.
reserve
Yeah.
currency? It would
Yeah.
be almost not, it was not very smart to trust it
Hmm.
without really
Yeah.
I'm trying not to offend here everyone,
No,
but
that's right. No,
uh,
but then he was talking about the Bitcoin protocol, the way it's going, and I won't misquote. I probably will misquote him. He's far more intelligent than me. But the thing that really got me is what he was saying about the way the node setups are set into the protocol, and if enough people within that system that is basically protecting the network do not want it to go a certain way, then it doesn't matter whether someone owns 5% of Bitcoin that's out there and ever going to be out there. It doesn't matter that, a big institution may want it to go a certain way. If the majority of hopefully the people that are really into Bitcoin and what they would like to see happen to it and believe in it for what it really truly is, because I think I forget sometimes why it was really pushed out there. Then if those majority of people protecting the network say, no, we don't want you to do that, they can't do it. And that I forgot was the pure fundamentals of how important that decentralized network is. And he was saying, but we've got to trust each other to keep that going because there's nothing else that you know can can um, can really we can really do. We can't make people do it.
mm.
We can't
But
make people.
do you
You,
trust
you can
that,
try.
no, I
Yeah.
mean, you, Andy, do you trust that if Bitcoin tomorrow goes down to, I don't know, 1 cent, do you trust that people, like, that there are enough people that would keep the network running just out of conviction, like literally just because of the true, like, understanding and wish for using that as a new financial system? I find it really hard, I have to admit, like, I think, I don't know, maybe I'm too biased, but it's very difficult for me. I just want to be honest, and I just think that one of my major, that's why I also projected to the future, one of my major criticism always is what happens when the it's when the block rewards for the network are just either too low or they stop to exist, or even if they're just too low, then I wonder if people would just, I don't know, out of the, I don't know, the goodness in their heart, just say like, well, I don't care. I take the you know I take the hit, and I just want to keep this network going. I don't know.
Oh, okay. That I presume again, I'm technically not 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 able to ask such in-depth questions, but I presume that by that stage we're talking about 140 years down the line yet, aren't we? Before we start to get to no more Bitcoin being mined. I would presume and hope that we are living in a totally different world by then, and one well, I won't be. I'll be in a box somewhere in the ground, probably, or scattered somewhere. But I would presume that if Bitcoin has done its thing, and the people behind Bitcoin and the network and the people in power that have embraced it and all the struggles that's going to come around of it, if it becomes what maybe potentially it could become, which is a new money, a new way of doing stuff, a new way of exchanging our time and energy, which is quite a way out there. We're so early. We're so early in this. But if it does and goes that way, then I cannot see that there'll be an issue with what you're saying because it will be so established in the mainstream. When I have no idea what that looks like, I can only pretend to know what it looks like. But I would kind of hope that it's so established, just like anything else has been established over the years, from a medium of exchange.
Yeah.
It's just become so established and so in the mainstream of what we're doing for producing services and well, however that looks like in that world. It's just a protected network where people, and I'm sure that is just going to be a base layer of value or whatever, and there'd be so many things built on top of that.
Yeah.
Then because of the amount of innovation that's been built on top of it, it will always be important to keep the base level secure, decentralized, and there. So, and there'd be incentives to keep that there as well.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, no, no, definitely, and I hope it will go into this direction. I'm kind of, I think in the same with the same train of thought, you could expand this also to something like the Ethereum network, where you say, well, the innovation there, because I'm also not an expert, but basically, Bitcoin itself does not allow for the creation of smart contracts. So, so basically, it's literally like a ledger that where everybody has a copy, and then we just all know, okay, these transactions are happening, and we can all just look at them and verify them and say, okay, like unless some entity, some magical entity, can somehow attack most like more than 50% of the nodes at the same time and somehow modify, and even then they would somehow probably, I don't know, modify one transaction, and how detrimental that would be is then a different kind of question. But I guess like the innovation part for Bitcoin is somehow a little bit of a tough nut, because how do you like innovate something that is so essential, that is literally like the core, because every single innovation, like every single modification, let's say, has a huge risk. Because I mean, I assume that particularly when large institutional investors jump on board, that it's not going to be that easy, that they're just going to be like, okay, let's try out something new, because there's a lot of money in the line. And with with the Ethereum network, like just this next step to actually be able to kind of basically not only have a ledger, but have some sort of like a record of a little script that can actually do things. So you can basically create like a little program where, I don't know, it says, if you send me this token, then it stays there until X, or then I automatically send you this other token. Like basically these things, I think, yeah, they I can see how this can be a base layer for generally very, very powerful like infrastructures. I think that's the right word.
Yep.
Infrastructures that is basically like a massive computer system where you can somehow buy yourself in, like literally you buy some sort of block space, and you can put out something that can be there technically forever, right? Like, I mean, the interface, like whatever your front end is, like your website, that might be blocked, because that's the first thing that probably has to go if institutions, governments, or something want to block people interacting with this. But the what's behind, like the smart contracts, I'm not sure like how this can be. I don't know, like maybe I'm also just not I'm not an expert, but I don't know how this can be somehow blocked or how this can be coerced.
I would presume um, there's probably far more intelligent people that
Yeah.
are into coding and networks and all of that stuff that probably understand this
Well,
more
I
than
just
this
actually,
old brain of mine,
yeah, I just gave it a shot. Like I literally just spent, I don't know, actually in total probably a couple of months, but like in the last couple of weeks, I just wanted to create some sort of some kind of like a crowdfunding smart contract just to kind of get an idea. Like it's more like a learning experience because
Okay.
it teaches you a lot about how things work, and you just roll up your sleeves and put your hands in, and it's
So
very
how did that
interesting.
work out?
Well,
Or how did it
I'm
work?
well, I basically there's this this guy called Patrick Collins who is Solidity. Solidity is the language in which the Ethereum code is written,
Okay.
and he's an engineer who's teaching that. And those videos sometimes on YouTube are like 16 hours long or like 2 days. So
Wow.
imagine how much time and investment it takes, but it's fantastic because it allows you to appreciate actually what's behind all of this. Like other than I just put in money and hopefully number go up.
Yeah.
But apart from this, I can now understand and grasp and appreciate much better. Okay, that's what the fuss is about, and that's powerful as an infrastructure. I can see how this can evolve, how this is not, you know, the overall the end. This is going to evolve for sure. Yeah, no, I can totally see that. So it was very helpful, I must say.
Got an, it's a complete dummies view that you can shorten down basically how it works.
Well, like, have you ever done any type of coding?
No,
Any? Okay, so
absolutely not.
generally, I would say I give it a shot.
Okay.
Um, I would say coding in general is just literally some type of text that you write like into a text file. Um, and all every single word has some sort of a meaning that you tell the computer. It's literally, I don't know, you can either write you give I don't know, you give anything, you assign anything to a variable, for example, to a word. You take the word Andy and you do Andy equals, I don't know, 2 plus 2, and then Andy is 4. And so basically, this is in very simple terms. You can obviously then create real programs where you say, where you have functionalities that can somehow repeat themselves, where you can perform scripts to do repetitive tasks, or where you can say, okay, this is a conditional, like if that condition fits to what you see, then do this, and if not, do that. And you can do this endlessly. And so that's just in very simple terms how the very basic, almost all programs work on that
Okay.
kind of concepts. And now Solidity in itself is kind of, I mean, for me as a hobby programmer, it's quite complicated because it's not, and it's there are some programming languages that are very intuitive where you can just say, you know, it's literally something you can watch a YouTube video and you can say, ah, okay, cool, I can do something after this 15 minutes video. I get some output. But Solidity is very exact. Like you really have to give a lot of specifications. You have to really know what these things will do and mean. Otherwise, it will just throw errors and it will be very tough. And that's, we're talking about 2024. Like, I don't even want to know how people in the 80s or 90s, when, you know, when there was no automatic program that would underline the bugs that you have in your code when you actually had to go through lines and that's that I would have just shot myself. That's too tough. But that's more or less how I see it. And so basically, again, I just try to do this to get a little bit to get a better understanding of what people can use it for, and then and particularly, I think my motivation is because I think that all these kind of payment systems in itself, this is just the logical, like intuitively, I would say this is the logical kind of tool that bots and agents that AI agents will use to do transactions in between each other.
Yeah.
And you already see this like this this is evolving extremely fast. Like literally, I think Google and ChatGPT obviously is an LLM, but Google also has like their own kind of agents that basically, you can just say you don't, other than bots are just very simple. They can only do very simple tasks like you in order, if you have a company and you don't want to talk to your clients, then you have some bots that say like, oh, do you want to complain? Okay, then press two. But agents, they can actually really, like, you can tell them, I would like to go, I don't know, to China. And can you please give me some advice and book the ticket for that? And so that's already a different story. And if they have to then make payments, then obviously they're not going to make a bank account and then get some fiat, and that's way too complicated. So that was a little bit my motivation, if you understand where I'm coming from, to understand a bit better how these payment systems work, because it seems to me intuitively this will be much more of a native connection. Like that would be just logical that they would use these systems, blockchain systems, that AI agents will use blockchain-based systems for transactions that will happen, and that will happen if we want it or not. And so it might be better to understand these things. Does it make sense?
Total sense to a degree. That don't yeah, please don't forget I'm just an old fart. But it does make sense because that's sort of kind of what gets me excited about this space. It's all that innovation. People were trying, people like yourself, lots of younger people than me are innovating in this space, and it's happening. There's obviously, from my point of view, I always get a little bit sort of, I'll be a bit hypocritical here, probably. I always get a little bit dubious about, because I've sort of lost so much faith in, unfortunately, what's happened to our current currencies that we're using. And there's not a lot of faith and trust in that, because it's always down to third party telling us what we can do and what we can't do.
Mm.
So I always get that little bit of heebie-jeebies when innovation is happening on a centralized basis. Now, that's a very big bias of mine, and I have a tendency to switch off if somebody, or if I'm observing or trying to find out about something that's centralized, because I will sit and think, oh God, yeah. If it's not centralized, then if it's centralized through third parties somewhere down the line, they can dictate how that works. And is that going to be in the best interest of me, my children, my grandchildren, their children, da 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 da. But then talking to you and just listening to you, it's just made me realize, then at some point we have got to trust these new systems, and we've got to let them be come out. And it's stupid for me to be so biased, because that way I might be missing a trick, not only from an investment point of view, but also from a is that going to be good for my children and my grandchildren, and that's healthy. So
Mm.
it's kind of cool that you shared that, really.
It's funny that you say that you mention the word trust, because to be honest, again, like I have to be really honest. Like I think I do this also because of a lack of trust in a way,
Yeah,
because it's just so difficult. Like even, you know, in order to interact with the Ethereum network, if you want to do some sort of transactions, many people use what they call the MetaMask wallet, right? So
yeah,
the MetaMask is just the name of this wallet that
sure.
is very, very popular. And obviously I can see, and I've already seen some friends of mine that I introduced to that, they'd be like, yeah, but I mean, come on, what is this? Like, I'm not gonna put in like even like €1,000 or €500 into something like that. I mean, that is a scam. It must be. And so that's in order for yourself to put yourself in a position where you can confidently to somebody that you like without it's I'm not even saying lying, but unintentionally, like out of ignorance, not being able to protect that person, and somehow telling somebody to use something, you need to have some sort of responsibility to do that. And that is actually a lack of trust in my ability to understand it, but mainly I think in the system itself. And that's, I think, a motivation where I at some point I just said, okay, look, I'm not a programmer, I'm not a developer, but I don't know, I used Python in the past, and because of some kind of like just like I don't know, website stuff, like a little bit of JavaScript, and so I just throw myself in and take a lot of time and energy and try to kind of understand. And one thing leads to another, and then you realize, oh, maybe I could do some sort of like I don't know, a crowdfunding, or actually, to be honest, at some point I just thought, man, there's so many people that just throw their money into some sort of meme coins because they think, oh, maybe, it's literally just throwing out the money out of the window. But they think maybe I can make millions and tomorrow I'll be rich. And if only you can catch like 0.01% of that money that goes into Pepe or Bonk or something like that, then you might actually create a fund me page for I don't know, something that can actually really really be something, like not
Benefit.
just, yeah, that can benefit anything you want, really. I mean, I don't want to say drug development, even though that was my first intuitive idea because of my background, but I know that many people might not be big fans of that. But then, you could just use it for anything, and you just have to understand it and trust yourself to understand it, and then also kind of use it appropriately. But can I just add something
Yeah,
more?
of
Because
course.
there's another level to this that I find that today I had a discussion about this, and I find very interesting because once you like understand that AI agents that we're going to be using more and more, that for them it will just be native. It will be just normal to use blockchain based transaction systems. Then I wonder at some point if you say, okay, from here in 10 years or whatever the time span is, how will the world look like? Like what is it then actually what we're going to be doing if, repetitive tasks can be taken over by those agents, and even like data analysis tasks, they are much more powerful than us. Like maybe could it be that then people think like, oh my God, the good old times where we were allowed to, slam the hamster wheel. maybe maybe people just actually are then forced to acknowledge that they have to understand their existence much better, because they will just sit there and be like, I don't know, what type of matrix do I actually live? And there's no way out of this anymore once you're there.
Yeah, that's it's an interesting. That's quite a few people talk about, AI, blah blah blah. And again, I'm no expert at it, but I always sit there logically and think, okay, if we're going to go through a massive innovative time in our timeline, I don't know how long that's going to take. It seems to be getting quicker and quicker and quicker, and changes seem to be happening quicker and quicker and quicker. Then maybe, part of that pain that we are going to all have to go through is that not only, maybe, sorry, probably a better way of putting it, maybe it will be down to us to then start to have to look at how we personally can start innovating, to make a difference. Maybe, we're going to have to accept that, we can't do what we've always done on the hamster wheel, which to many will be quite nice, as long as that's not going to be at detriment to the standard of living, which I don't know how you get
Mm.
over that one, but you don't know. But maybe that will force a lot of people to start, getting into how can I be more productive, and what service can I provide for my community. How creative can I be? And I think that probably will have to go through a spell. I don't know how big that spell's going to be, where it will force because we are the market, force many of us to actually be more creative and be more disciplined to think, okay, I can't do that anymore.
Mm.
That's going to go. You either sit on your backside, which is my old school way of doing stuff. You either sit on your backside or you get off your ass, and you start to be creative. And then it's down to people like myself, as a father, if I'm still around, to support, not necessarily give money, but support and encourage people to, to be creative and be innovative, and come up
Mm.
with solutions very much similar. It's really interesting listening to what you're doing. It's really inspiring, like you're doing, you're trying to learn about, this is going to be a part of our future. So I want to know how it works. And, you know,
Mm.
maybe
I
you'll be creative and come up with a solution that no one else has thought about. So,
Yeah, I mean, I hate to be, I usually don't like this kind of conversations that go too much into the topic. Oh, maybe AI will take all of our jobs and it will all be bad because it's for sure it's not going to be just that. But I do think that it's kind of interesting to just really like make a projection, just kind of create, it's like a mental exercise, like a thought experiments. How could the world look like in that time where maybe even just for like the discussion's sake, you could say, what if all the tasks that you can do that can just be taken over by agents, like maybe even like in physical form at some point, where you have literally have robots that can do everything. So what are we gonna do? And when I went down this path, I have to tell you, I actually realized at some point I said, wow, I don't know. Maybe we're completely wrong. And I know there's all these movies with Arnold Schwarzenegger and the Skynet and they want to kill us. And maybe actually that's wrong. Maybe that whatever that type of entities are, then maybe that is actually somehow the alien thing. Maybe they could even see us as gods because we created them. And then I went even further and I said, oh God, maybe we were created by something that came before us, and how is that like it's kind of, do you understand that connections, like maybe we cannot even perceive them anymore because just as we are a physical nature and whatever kind of AI agent will then be there in the future, they are not on the same plane as us, and maybe we can therefore not perceive what, or let's say maybe not all of us are in that position, but I feel in that position that maybe what came before us is just on a different plane. It might be all there all along, and we just struggle to perceive it. And it would just be a very logical next phase, like the cycles. It's just a
yep,
new cycle,
yep.
and we're all wrong, and it's nothing dangerous, it's nothing hostile, it's literally just the way it goes. And in 100 years people will be like, oh yeah, there are these humans, but there's also this new entity. And in 1,000 years, then maybe the entity is the predominant entity and then we're just part of the past, like other things are part of the past, and that's just how it's going to be.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's so interesting because while you're talking, I'm just sitting there thinking, well, how would I be? If I was a lot younger, and I kind of hope that I'm going to see this innovation come into, this my space
Mm.
before I go. But we'll see. But I always sit there and I think, how would I be if I was in my 30s, 20s, and this sort of thing happened? And I would literally embrace it because I wouldn't want to fight it. Now, the only reason why I'd want to fight it if it was threatening my very existence
Yeah.
to me, to my family, to my community, and I needed to fight, to survive. But if I didn't need to fight, then I would want to embrace it. And I was listening to you, and I was thinking, but If I had the opportunity to sit with a form of intelligence
Mm,
far greater than the way I look at my life, I would like to interact with that to come up with solutions to make being human better.
mm,
I would have to embrace it. I wouldn't be scared of it. I'd want to embrace it. The only reason why I'd be scared of it if it was going to be of a threat to me personally,
yeah,
physically, or my family. But if it wasn't, I would like a conversation with. I wouldn't. I'd love it. I think it's fantastic. It always reminds us you watch Star Trek.
yeah. Have you ever done that actually? I do this all the time. Like,
I do
have you
with.
ever with ChatGPT just
I do.
having
Yeah.
conversations? Yeah,
Yeah. I even. Camel laughs. I even say thank you at the end of it.
yeah, yeah,
And it
yeah,
always says, "Oh, not a problem. If I
yeah,
can be a fix," and it's just like, wow,
yeah.
that's brilliant. And I think that's important because what you were saying about, why is this not the next part of the way we evolve? That interaction, that might be a part. And I think half the time we think we're so flipping special. Um, and I'm not sure that's happened out of ignorance or that's been deliberately manipulated to make us feel like we're the best thing since sliced bread in the universe, which I don't believe we are. I would have to embrace it
Mm,
if it was not a threat to me. Now, a lot of people turn around and say, "Oh, yeah, it's a threat to my job." Well, that was what I was talking about earlier. Well, if a company that makes cars decides to go bust, that's just as much as a threat, that you haven't got control of. So, and that can happen in any industry. Nothing's safe nowadays. And
mm,
I don't think anything was safe back in the day.
mm,
We evolve, and we either sit there and think, okay, I'll let the world look after me, or you look at yourself as I am the world and I want to look after the world. So how can I be of good service?
mm. It's kind of, I'm
Basic.
wondering if, the service is going to be directed towards us, like literally that entity is serving us or serving themselves or the planet or something else that we don't even understand. Maybe it's in a different plane. But all of this conversation, like the entire conversation, reminds me actually of a situation when I was, I think, 18 or something. I was the first time I had the Skype. Skype was this, I mean, you probably know this old app that is basically like Zoom, but
Yeah.
decades ago. And and she looked at me and she said, "Oh," she was already in her mid 90s at that time, and she grew up in Ecuador in a small town. Like literally, I have the feeling, just to kind of like keep it short, she lived like 100 years before, because when she was a kid, she was just still riding. There were no cars in her town, so she looked at me and she said, "Wow, I don't know how this magic works, but I'm so happy to see you. So I don't actually really care. I'm happy that I can use this."
There you
And
go.
that is literally a little bit, only that I'm now like 38. I'm not 95. So I have the same thing with ChatGPT in a way. I just kind of try to understand the large language model that is behind that, but it's very mathematical and just beyond me for the moment. I don't have the time to get into this right now. I'm happy if I can use the API to kind of like make it connect to something else that I want to create. That's already a bit of a challenge, but yeah, I think I just can't imagine like how this will evolve in the future, where already now, if you the newest systems, you don't only have conversations anymore with some type of large language model that has no intonation, that has struggles to keep a conversation up. They actually really, you can even choose. You can say, "Hey, can you talk to me in a very relaxed and chilled manner?" And then the way and the form and the melody, how this entity talks to you changes completely. And that's impressive. Like all of these things, and we're just at the beginning. So yeah, I'm looking forward to see how this develops. And I just, in the context of what I said before, I just hope somehow that we're smart enough to somehow use this in a, I don't know, at least in an equitable way, like at least not in a way that we create some enormous advantages for certain parts of the world and all the rest they can just, because that would just be like giving somebody superpowers and some other parts of the world, they cannot, it's like people flying and people not flying, because that difference in terms of productivity, that is just unbeatable. Like you cannot compete as a human being. It's impossible. Yeah. Can I just like tell you one last thing, like because it kind of, I just coincidentally a couple of weeks ago, there's this company that is called Tether, and they are one of the biggest stablecoin producers,
Sure.
like, and that is called USDT.
Yep.
It's pegged to the US dollar, and I realized, going on their website, I was just kind of like looking through their career page, and they literally they invest because they're very successful. Like this is a rather small company, and they make billions. And so I saw they invest basically like they hire machine learning developers, machine learning this, machine learning data engineer this, and it's like the page goes on and on. And I don't know, I don't think I exaggerate if I say there's like 100 open positions, like just in that field. And then they have, I think, like three or four sub companies, and one of them is called, I think, Evo something, Evo Tether or something, or Tether Evolution, and they look in for I saw this just job ad for a person who is who does the regulatory part for, and I thought like, okay, regulatory must be financial regulatory, because, but it was actually a regulatory person in the medical field, because they want to go into what is the intersection between human and machine, like literally just putting a chip into the brain of a person, and that type of research. And that is then, I mean, that means that a company that is extremely powerful and has a lot of investment capacity and a lot of capital, they put the money on the table to make this a reality. And if this happens next year or in 10 years, it doesn't matter, because it will at some point if it's possible. And so, connected with what I said before, maybe you are going, like you, not you, but we are going to be part of this agent system, because you just get the headset with the VR. And I know this is now really way out there, but yeah,
It's
it's
not.
not even an option to opt out, because some people could not go to the pub because they didn't get the vaccine. Maybe some people, they won't go to the pub because they don't have a chip or something like this. And I really don't want to kind of, that's a bit of a kind of half joke, but that's more or less what I spend my time thinking about and try to learn about that.
Again, it just emphasizes to me that what, at my level of existence, it doesn't matter whether I like it, don't like it, it's being innovated and it's going to become a part of maybe my future, I'm not sure, but definitely my children's future and my children's children's future, and so on and so on and so on. And it, it it's kind of, I want to kind of say it's exciting. But picking up on what you said earlier, I've got to try and think now because said a lot. Oh God, there was something you said about whether AI robots will be a good thing. Was it a good thing for us or not?
I think it will be definitely a good thing. I mean, good is always subjective, but I was just kind of trying to paint a picture how generally it could look like, and giving like an incentive for people to make the effort to understand it a bit better, or just throwing yourself into the cold water and just say like, okay, this is really something that, if I want it or not, I'm not 95, and still I have this kind of situation where I suddenly struggle to understand the basics of what I'm actually probably interacting with in the future day to day, because
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure there will be no job if there will be no school that cannot use these kind of systems, and that's your children and the children of the children. Imagine when they grow up and come into the workforce, they will be a complete different type of brain. Like if you talk to them, they will have a different skill set. They will, just like, as I don't know, my parents are much better at, you know, certain things because back in their generation they needed a skill set that, if they didn't have a computer when they went to school, that forms in a different way. Exactly the same way this generation, like the people that are now in school, that grow up with ChatGPT and these kind of things, I mean, this is just going to be a whole different world, and it's really fast. So I just see this as an incentive, because also I like these kind of things. So for me, this is kind of a hobby, but I see this as an incentive, and I try to see it positive in that way. So I definitely want to frame it in a subjectively positive manner, even though I know that some people might not see it that way.
Yeah. It's hard. Do you ever sort of even try to put those steps together rather than jump? Oh, that's how I can see it in 10 years' time, but actually think about how and what effects that need to be understood to get it from A to B to C to D to E to F to G. Because quite often we sit there and we can be very imaginative and really talk out there and say like that's what I believe it can be. But do you ever sit there and think, well, how do I get there? And what's that process look like?
Yeah, to be honest, I spend a lot of time thinking about this, and I wish I had more of these crazy people that would like to have this conversation, because it's really something where I think you have to bounce off of each other, because
Sure.
it's very difficult. It turns into some kind of very crazy 8D chess in your brain if you really try to make what you say, like the links between, like how one thing leads to another. It's much easier just to say, take a time frame and say, in 10 years it will most likely be like this. I think
Sure.
that is less of an issue.
Yeah. We have someone else
I
joined.
think, yeah, that's
Ivan,
perfect.
can you hear us, Ivan?
Oh, maybe he has some audio issues.
He might pop in a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is so cool. Um, and that's why I have to slow my brain down sometimes and just think, well, okay, how can I join the dots? I can be very imaginative
Mm.
and I can get very carried away about what I watch, what I consume, what I absorb. And then that sometimes has to sit into my narrative of how I want it to be, but I have to be real and think to myself, well, I'm not involved in that situation, so I've just got to see it play out. But saying that, I do like to try very slowly now to try and join the dots and think,
Yeah.
okay, purely from an investment point of view, to see if that's going to be a good investment. Maybe for me, maybe for my family, maybe for my children. That I find interesting, and that then forces me to look at the step process more to understand it.
Mm. Mm.
Ivan, are you there?
This is just a microphone test. You hear me?
Oh yes, we can. I can hear you. I can hear you
Yes, hi.
breathing really heavy.
Oh, wow. All right. Let me just readjust my microphone, I assume.
No problem. I thought it was having a
Nice to meet you. How are you doing, Ivan?
There we go. Is this better right now?
miles better.
Much.
Yeah. Wonderful. I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Just had
Excellent.
dinner and thought I'd give a quick jump into the virtual pub chat.
That's
How about you
brilliant.
both? Sorry, I did not want to crash your conversation right now.
Oh,
I was
dude, no, this is what it's
happy
all
to
about.
listening in.
No, you can join in. I need to go to the toilet actually, so it's perfect. You can join in. We're just crazy talking about innovation in the blockchain space, the AI space, where we see possibly things are going, how we feel about it. And what we were just talking about is like most of us can sit and say, "Oh, this is what I think it will look like in 20 years' time." And I was just saying to one LV, do you ever actually sit there and think about, well, how do I get from here to there? And that thought process I think that's what we was talking about, wasn't it?
Mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think we started the conversation also about AI agents and how they are taking over certain tasks, and therefore I was trying to kind of paint a picture how in 10 years the world might look like, and how also children that are now in school would perceive this kind of process, and when they grow up to be in their, I don't know, enter the workforce and be in life, that they would then just somehow find something completely different, something that we have never really experienced in that time. And yeah, that's a little bit of a summary, I guess.
Thank you very much for sharing, and thank you for the lovely summary as well.
What do you reckon,
Yeah,
Arthur?
it's interesting, right? Especially as my background is actually an innovation specialist, which is kind of funny.
Perfect.
Fantastic.
And
Absolutely perfect. Could you just hang on 1 second then? Because
yeah,
I
absolutely.
just need to go to the
Go for
toilet.
it.
I'll talk about whatever, because that's going to be really interesting to listen to.
Go for it. Go for it. I'll wait to bring in that train of thought then. Enjoy.
Fantastic. Ivan, do you wanna introduce yourself a little bit? Like, I don't know, I have
Gladly.
no idea. Actually, it's really funny because I'm also just jumping on the call here and then.
Yeah, I think if I recall correctly, you jumped on the call 2 editions ago,
I think
I
so. Yeah.
believe. And if I recall correctly, I believe your background was in chemistry. I think it was immune system research, if I
Yeah,
recall
good enough.
correctly. So that's cool. And I think I'll share a bit more of the details afterwards when Andy's
Sure.
also back.
Yeah.
But in a nutshell, it resonated a lot. And I loved the fact that you were trying to connect for 4 times. And then eventually you had managed, and that you had the courage to go online. To me, that was, I would say, an inspiration, or at least it lowers the barrier. And I really thought it was a cool thing to do. So kudos on that, so to say.
Well, thanks. I mean, it was a technical issue. I'm happy it worked.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand, right? Not everybody uses Zoom as well. So yeah, but that's interesting. This future perspective on how the world could look like based on AI agents. That's a
Yeah.
wild one.
Maybe I give you a little bit more of a
Absolutely, that would be
detail,
lovely.
because
Yeah.
I just like what I told Andy before is that I had this kind of conversation today where I had the feeling, and that's maybe a bit crazy, but I had the feeling, so let's say that eventually you go into a world where you have all these AI agents that actually, turn into entities, somehow powered by blockchain-based transaction, and they might, create the new entity that will somehow be the new step of the evolution. And so the thing that I said is like, maybe they don't want to kill us at all, maybe they actually see us as gods, it wouldn't be completely rational to say that they created me, so they must be God. And maybe there was something similar that came before us and that we also referred to as God before, only that it exists on a different plane that we struggle to perceive nowadays, just as maybe in 1,000 years an AI agent will struggle to perceive a human being. I don't know. Like it's very out there, but that's more or less a short summary of what I told Andy before.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
absolutely. And what I love about that is it kind of brings the question into mind, are they even aware or conscious of it, right?
Absolutely.
And is it even okay to give them like a they, right? I don't know. And it brings into mind, I was recently thinking about this based on I think it was last week, when Andy and Camel were talking a bit more about consciousness. I was like thinking to myself, how do I define, or how do we define consciousness? Is an AI actually even conscious? Based on how it's built up, it's yeah. Curious about your thoughts on that. I wouldn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think the moment like we start having these discussions as a society, then we're very close to giving it obviously a right, a legal right, and therefore it's not just an entity, it will be like some part of society that is worth protecting. And that's then, I think, because we were saying with Andy just before how you connect the dots, like it's easy to say what happens in 10 years, but it's very difficult to say next year this is going to happen and that dot will connect to that dot 6 months later and then that. But so I think there would be maybe one dot, right? So you have a situation, a transition phase where you say, oh, damn, they have some sort of consciousness that we have to protect. And therefore, at some point, the next dot would be maybe that this conscious entity says, oh, but okay, so I'm here, so therefore, I am. So what is my role? Your role is being a human, but what is my role? To serve you, really? Is that all I'm here for? Maybe I have my own, thoughts and my own consciousness, my own wish. And so that's where the divergence starts, where you know some part will be some AI entity, some part will be only human, and there will be also conversion, maybe, where it will be a mix, where maybe be it some kind of like chip that you put into your brain. I'm just kind of half joking, but it might also be something that we cannot even imagine right now. Might be something completely different, and these are the dots that I could see.
I ask myself, does consciousness equate to self-awareness, right? Perhaps. And does it also equate or imply that there's an authority to make decisions about myself, right? What I find interesting, or what I could imagine happening, is that perhaps in the future we might be able to, in Western society, through the means of research, find that there's also consciousness and potentially self-awareness within plants. And then we also might have to transcribe legal rights, potentially, right? And it always makes me think about, like, how would that potentially impact, like, vegan diet as an example, right? The people that have a vegan diet because of the suffering of the animal. But if there is potential suffering to plants as well, I'd be curious what next? What would happen then?
You know what I'm fascinated by with this is that it may be a case at some point where, whether we will get access to it or not, or it's going to be kept away from us, that we can have that conversation with an intelligence that may start to make us ask us what we really are, who we really are, and why we really are. That's the conversation I would love to have. I would think that would be really powerful, because I was saying to one LV a little while ago, Ivan, that I think we have a tendency sometimes to rightly or wrongly, but most of us wrapped up in our little worlds seem to think that we're the most important thing since sliced bread for some reason, as this whole concept of human beings are far more most intelligent. And a lot of people turn around and say we're the most intelligent people on the planet. I would query that sometimes.
For sure.
Yeah. But then it's we on. I can't honestly believe personally in. I may be wrong. I may be right. I don't know. I don't care whether I'm wrong or right. But I don't personally believe we're the most intelligent living organisms in the universe. I really don't. I think it's far too big. But I think we've lost ourselves on that over time, where we've been so wrapped up in, whether that's been deliberate or not, so wrapped up in, oh, this is, you're born, you go to school, this is what you have to learn. The reason why you have to learn it is to go out and produce, to consume, live in the bubble, hamster wheel, da 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 da, get to wherever, enjoy the little things in life if you're fortunate to, and then you get to retire and happy days, watch your kids, whatever. That's what we've just become as a rule. And I know there's certain places around the world that would see that as a massive privilege, but I can only speak from my own perspective. And I think that would really, that's the danger, because talking, I would presume, talking to something that was quote unquote far more intelligent from a neutral point of view, from just existing, um, would definitely make, I'm sure they would make someone ask the question, well, why do you think that you're the center of the universe? Why do you think you're, etc., 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 you know? And I think that's what a lot of people could be frightened of, because it would make us actually look inwardly and ask questions that, quite honestly, a lot of us have just forgotten about.
Can I
How
ask
does
you,
how does that
Ivan,
sit?
just to clarify? Sorry, Andy, just to clarify, because I think Ivan asked a question about consciousness, and I just wanted to ask consciousness and awareness. Like, how would you, like, would you agree? Like, how would you define consciousness and awareness? Would you agree that consciousness comes in different levels, that there's not just either consciousness or not? And would you say that awareness is just the detection of the fact that there is something? Or would you say, would you somehow define it in a different way, just before giving an answer, just so we're on the same page?
From my point of view,
Yeah, from your both, yeah.
okay, from my point of view, is that until, you might have heard me talking about this, might have spoke about it last week, but I've definitely mentioned and talked about it, not in depth though, until I started to ask myself some serious questions innerly, but and as in, who am I? Why am I? Why am I here? Why do I feel things that don't appear to be what I think they appear to be? And until I went on a quest to try and even learn that possibly there could be an awareness far greater than my actual physical 3D construct has always been for probably 55 years on this planet, until I went down that rabbit hole with myself, through meditation, through being quiet, trying to work the noise of life out of my awareness, as you put. I on a few occasions I've recognized that there's something within that is far greater than my 3D sight, hearing, you know, smell, feel, touch, senses, witness every day. There's something there that's making me feel that there's more to, whether we call it consciousness. I hate words sometimes because I really find it difficult to express what I'm actually saying, because it's beyond words sometimes, what I felt. That's the way I see that awareness playing out inside of me, and it's so difficult when you're living this feely, touchy, smelly, looky existence day to day.
Interesting.
Mm.
Ivan, are you still there?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I was thinking about this right now, and to me, I think, or I assume, or I believe, if, let's say, this intelligence, right, could we even be capable enough to be aware of it, right? So perhaps it would have to be dumbed down to the extent that we might learn from it as if it would be so much more advanced than us. I'm not sure we would be able to understand or perhaps be aware of it to even start to understand it, right? But most certainly, I do believe that reflection basically is the only path forward. And reflection is the step required to think about what we have perceived, what we have experienced, to harvest that, to then perhaps look at the same, let's call it three-dimensional space situation, and reflect what else does it mean for me? How else could I have perceived or been aware about the same situation? And then to then eventually think for myself, what can I learn from it, and how this, or how should or could this influence or change my behavior going forward?
Mm.
So I do believe it's absolutely necessary in that regard.
Yeah.
And I just think that we're bound by words, like Andy said it. And I think there is a certain bias towards intelligence, that it's perhaps just an analytical one, but not necessarily other sorts of intelligences. And I do believe our biological system is bound by our five senses. Perhaps we might be able to be aware of more factors and more intelligences if we would have more senses, right? Perhaps a time-bound sense or a future sensing sense, right?
Mm.
And that is what I find so interesting, that I mean, I do hope, right? I do hope we're not the most intelligent species around. But what I do find astonishing is how we have, as a species, have been able, not just through genetics like rats, for instance, but also through language, have been able to pass down intelligence over time,
Mm.
to build this collective intelligence, libraries, books, stories, narratives, that allow us to harvest from previous generations.
Mm.
And I think we're still at the very, very early steps. Maybe in 1,000 years, people will look back and think like these were the modern cavemen or something, you know, perhaps. And that's something that I find so interesting. It's really, how will that play, this collective intelligence, play out in the future?
Mm. That's very interesting. I somehow it's, acquiring information at a certain type of speed is obviously a skill that is somehow associated, or a trait that is associated to advance in general. Like, how this really somehow then connect to consciousness or awareness is really difficult to put into words, as Andy said, because I wonder if, if you go back millions of years, um, we all kind of somehow derive from the same unicellular system, and there is this thing called the endosymbiont theory, that is basically a theory that somehow describes how we progressed from a unicellular stage to a multicellular stage. We, as generally species, as all species, as are deriving from that unicellular ancestor. And it's somehow funny because I wonder if there is some type of, there was that back in the time, if that theory is correct, some type of energetic consciousness where a unicellular system said, oh, the the environment has changed. So the universe, or whatever the environment was, has changed in a way that for me it's an advantage to be inside this other unicellular system. And the theory in simple terms basically says that one unicellular system went into the other one, and then because of some potentially external changes, there was an advantage for them to have some sort of symbiosis, and it's eventually they grew obligatory together, and so that gave rise to multicellular systems that somehow then share and specialize on tasks inside, like organs do then later on in animals and human beings and other beings. So I was just wondering, it's kind of funny because it's literally, it would be the same if we at some point try to, you know, experiment with putting chips inside our brain, because it's like a revival of the endosymbiont theory. It's like, oh, I need to somehow put this inside me because together somehow we can grow. But what does this actually tell us? So what does this mean for our, or how this consciousness grows and merges, or does it merge at all? Is that actually really an advantage? what does it, how will the first human being that is then, is it actually still a human being that will eventually, like, is that the next step in the evolution? It's like, what does this mean for me? Awareness is, I don't know, I think I I use awareness for something else actually. Usually when I meditate, and my aim is to increase my awareness, it's literally focusing on something very strongly. But then awareness, if you, there are other types of meditation where you actually try to do the opposite, where you try to exclude all signals that there are, so that what is inside you can come out. And that is what, in my opinion, I'm not, again, not an expert in that either, but that increases the consciousness because it expands something that comes from within that you didn't even know it existed. It's like you're having suddenly superpowers if you do this for 10 days or a month. And that thing is very, very powerful. So it's very difficult for me to really answer that in definite terms, because I have no idea how consciousness will actually even have to be articulated in the future when these things grow together. It's just, I can just look at the past and say, maybe for them it was the same, only we cannot grasp it anymore because it happens on a different plane. It's not accessible for us anymore. Just like we cannot see certain colors that bats or other animals can.
I've got a question for you both. Well, I've got two actually. These are the sort of conversation. One, I love listening to, and two, I love taking part in, because it really makes you sort of sit there and really think about life, really. But anyway, the first question would be, if there was a way of, like Elon talks about, the Neuralink, which we're basically saying is putting a chip in your brain or whatever, however they're going to do it. Why would you want to do that? What benefit would you try to imagine? You've got to use your imagination here. What benefit would you see of that being to you as a human being, and how do you think that even would work? Either one can, whoever wants to answer that.
I'm gonna try to take it because I'm gonna jump off very
Okay.
quickly. So just in a few sentences, that would be fantastic because I would never have to kind of worry about ingesting information ever again. Like that would be my main motivation. All the time that I spend reading something or listening to something, like it doesn't mean that the conclusions, you still have to make them, and that's still energy. But the speed of how you can acquire knowledge, or all the knowledge that is then inside you, that would literally make you like Superman, like even better than Superman. Like you would just, that is something that, if I imagine, if I understand your question correctly, I would use this to do like endless things, to create, build things that literally I would probably just quit everything and go somewhere, try to, if I were the only one having this power, if everybody has this power, we don't have to ask ourselves the question. But then I would just literally do anything that is needed for a certain community. I would just do that because I can, because I would be the only person who has this superpower, I guess. I'm gonna drop off. It's been really, really nice talking to you, Andy, and nice knowing you, Even. I'm gonna watch the rest of this story so that I can get to know you a little bit better. And but yeah, I hope to see you next week, or otherwise.
Dude, yeah, next week before you go, we're going to try and do like a bit of a Sunday special, Christmas
Right.
special type
Oh,
one.
nice.
I know Camel's going to come on. I think he did say to me he might struggle tonight because he's got some family commitments. But yeah, he was definitely, he was saying, "Oh, what are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to wear a Christmas hat for stars." For sure. And what I was thinking about doing was possibly just opening up to anybody, just to come on and just have a good time, really talk about whatever. And so yeah, I'd love you to come on next week, dude, if you can
Cool.
make it.
Yeah, I
And
really
one
appreciate
LV
it.
Thank you for sharing as well.
Mm.
And thank you for having the courage to come online as well today.
Thanks a lot. You're very welcome. I'm looking forward to hear more of you.
Yeah, no worries at all. You take good care.
You
Have a
too.
lovely evening.
See you
You too.
later.
Take care.
Take care, buddy. Ivan.
So, the question that you posed, right? Maybe my mind is currently biased to think linearly.
Okay.
So I would try to assume that perhaps this Neuralink could take over computational tasks or tasks that algorithms and computers can take over. So, for instance, I mean, I'd love it, right? If my memory wouldn't fade anymore, right? If you could replay your memories as a real-time movie, your dreams, as an example, right? All of these things, if you could make faster analytical decisions, as an example.
Yeah.
But then I also ask myself, is it that different from what we already have at our disposal right now? You know, perhaps. I mean, yes, it's in my phone, it's on my computer. So I would wish, if I were to say a wish, for it to be really adopted at mass scale, I would nearly believe it to require a bigger impact. And maybe it's something, and that's kind of a bit from the innovation side, right? You always try to develop based on users' needs. Not always,
Sure.
but in general terms, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes the user doesn't know what exists, right? The spectrum isn't open yet. It's a bit like art. You cannot really ask people what do they want as art, but rather you have to first put it in front of them and then you get the reaction. And I think with Neuralink, you might have the chance to do it as art, right? Develop it as such that it could have a fundamental impact on maybe even our emotional sensations, right? Let's say, for instance, why don't we increase our sensitivity to touch because we focus our neuron electrical impulses towards this area that is sensitive to touch, and suddenly you're able to sense your food 10 times more as you could now. And that to me, that would be the real value, in my opinion, bigger than the computational one, which we more or less already have access to, in my
Sure.
opinion.
So basically, are you saying if it enhances the human experience to another level?
If you could do it, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I didn't look at it like that, but that would make sense, and that would maybe bring back what you were saying earlier. If you were tasting food that was better than, you might all of a sudden realize that this food's living. You shouldn't be eating
Maybe.
it in the first place.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think it would allow you to focus more on the human side of things.
Sure.
As, let's say, if you want to improve yourself, it would allow you to really try to focus more on the behavioral adaptation of what you wish to implement rather than perhaps getting lost into the analytics of why did this happen, what are the moments, what, like, it might even give more objectivity, right? And maybe imagine if you could work with it to allow you to unbias your mind. I'm not even sure if it's possible.
Yeah.
Right. Considering we're in a system where you're always somehow biased one way or another. But if you could really live bias free, you know, or just change the filters, right? Or maybe even have physical influences like you don't need to wear sunglasses anymore. You just reduce the sensitivity of your eyes towards the light, as an example. I could imagine it being really interesting. But I don't think we're that far off in terms of, let's say, living with cyborgs, as an example.
Okay.
So my father has a pacekeeper. I think the name is
Yes.
pacemaker.
Yeah.
And he also requires hearing aid, right? So technically speaking, I could perceive my father as a cyborg, right?
Yeah.
So that would just be the next logical enhancement, which would be something improving your brain, right?
I think that's what love him or hate him. When Elon Musk talks about Neuralink, from the very little that I've ever listened to, he talks about the enhancing human experience along those lines, you know. So it's fascinating. I'm fascinated by it. I wish I was so much younger, Ivan, to see this. Because I honestly do believe we are going to go through such an acceleration of innovation over the next decade or so.
When have we not, right?
Well, we have, yeah, but it just seems to be more accelerated now. That's how I perceive it to be, because I'm only putting it on the timeline of my life, how long I've been here. But I suppose if you put it over what's really happened over the last 300, 400, 500 years, it's always changed. It's always changing. Changing.
Yeah. It just brings up a thought, I'm usually the type that fully endorses innovation, right? Yeah. Though I sometimes do believe that humans are capable of evil. So it's always kind of enjoying innovation, but with a certain, let's call it risk management, perhaps, or being a bit wary of things could be used also for the worse, right? And that would be something that would also worry me in regards to this. I mean, of course, enhancing the human experience sounds like a dream. It sounds like a lucid dream, actually, which is a little bit what I would perceive as an enhanced human experience, if you're actually even capable of harnessing lucid dreams, which is very interesting. Though it could pose also a big threat. I could imagine all sorts of things, right? Programming people to go do actions that they might not wish to do, right? As an example, brainwash humans into an army, as an example, to whatever. You can take it to the extremes. It could be very utopian, but it could also turn into very dystopian. And I'm curious, where along the line is the node, the time node, the decision node that might throw us into one or the other? And I don't know. That would be curious. That would be interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you was just saying, because a lot of what you were saying can be interpreted as in, well, we can be manipulated now to be evil, do evil things, do bad things. But I guess if we and we can follow cults, we can, just having this phone will allow us to plug into all sorts of horrible stuff that can influence us on a day-to-day basis and get us to do whether we think we're capable of doing it, but it could maybe manipulate us into doing things that maybe we didn't think we were capable of doing. The problem I think I would have to be very wary from what you're saying is that if I can't switch that off once it's inside of me, I have no control. Whereas at the moment, I can control the feed and the narrative of what I want to consume by by obviously switching it on and off to a degree, or we can say in the physical world outside of this internet universe that most of us live in the physical world, I still can control how I want to be by making decisions. Now, if I've got something inside of me that possibly can now control and influence that without me consciously being able to control or influence that, or losing the concept of consciously being able to control or influence it,
I love
that would worry me a lot.
I love what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I'd love to ask you, is it control, or is it the feeling thereof that you have control? And I could argue that
Yep.
already now we are in a state where we think we have, or we have a certain degree of control, but we're still under the influence.
Yeah, I get what you're saying totally, because ultimately the only way I can possibly get to that ultimate control is to live a pure existence on my own, with no other influence around me. Get dropped off on a rock somewhere out in space where I can live, and the only thing I control is my environment. That's me. Nothing can do it. That's the ultimate, obviously, of control. And this is what I don't like about words. But I get what you're saying, because through obviously I was born into where I live. I was born into the family that I was brought up with, and that has influenced me all through my life. Just my interactions have influenced me. I suppose our concept of control is maybe we're duped into thinking we control what we do.
Or
Yeah,
maybe we
it's a
just
great
don't.
point. It's a great point.
I think it's an assumption, or it's a hypothesis. I believe we like to believe we are in control
Yeah,
because we have a challenge to accept that it's simply chaos, right? That's probably it's probably easier to believe I have control, or I tell myself the narrative that I am in control, rather than accepting that chaos is probably the name of the game around us.
yeah, yeah. It is interesting because, and it's these sort of, I don't know, if you're either ready to go down this innerly thinking conversation or you're not. But if you are, then it starts to blow your mind about how we exist on a day-to-day basis, and probably how much we've been, well, I can openly admit I've been influenced all of my life, totally. And I and I
Absolutely, yeah.
and I don't think, I'd like to think, I should say, that I have been in control of most of the choices and avenues I've gone down. But if I'm brutally honest, probably I've had that control is becoming, has been more around the reaction to a situation or experience. And that wasn't my doing, possibly. Or
Yeah.
possibly it was. I don't know.
Or control within a very finite spectrum of potential options,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds better. It is fascinating. And I love it because it ultimately, when we start to think and ask those questions, and if we give ourselves that time to actually explore with no bias, although that's hard to do, because sometimes we have to damage our ego sometimes by admitting that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We have to admit to ourselves sometimes, shit, I was wrong. I don't like that. It doesn't feel right. But it's kind of cool to actually feel that, because that makes me feel even more human after all. It makes me realize that I'm not the center of the universe, and I can, you know, I can be an idiot just like everyone else is an idiot, or a good person like everyone else is a good person. But keep getting control of my ego sometimes is or understanding that I've even got an ego, is such an important part of looking a little bit deeper at what life means to me. Very philosophical, isn't it?
You know, I think, to me, one of the biggest steps, and it's an ongoing process, of course. That's why I'm not saying it's an achievement, but one of the biggest steps was actually being able to understand that there's the ego, try or attempt to understand its needs, but also sometimes I think having the situational awareness of knowing when it should be and come out and when not. Right? And not putting myself into the center, not putting myself into the middle, even if that's potentially sometimes what the ego would wish for. But having this balanced approach where you live in this harmony where it is allowed to exist and coexist with the other part, but nonetheless you don't suffocate or you don't ignore it, right? These two things, and it's a challenge.
It's a massive challenge.
And yeah, absolutely. And from the multiple hats that I wear and multiple areas and things that I do, I think this is to me one of the biggest things that I'm looking forward. I'm in my, I would say, early mid 30s, roughly.
Okay.
So that's the one big thing I'm interested in seeing. How will this spectrum in my being develop once kids are around?
All right. Okay.
Because I think that will also, right, be an interesting, playful experiment. How the ego has to develop, how it develops in between the relationship with your partner, right? Because I'm just going to make an example, right? Potentially your ego would like the attention, as an example, of your spouse, wife, whatever partner. Yet you do know that for the greater good, perhaps the child should get the attention. And these things, these trade-offs, these little moments of that's something I'm really excited for the future.
100%. I get you. I, um, I, do you know what? I've quite often, I don't talk about my life too much, but you bringing that up now, I've had the privilege of having 3 children and still got 3 children, got grandchildren now. And it's, you're adding to your comfort zone more egos. You really are. You so are. And as those egos grow up, then I've always found my challenge was, okay, who do I want to be and how do I want to be? And have I really got on top of my bias enough to be the type of person that I need to be for my family? That's quite a deep thing to say. But what I mean by that is I've had to recognize, and I'm very proud personally, albeit I'm an idiot. I'm a wally and I've been a complete idiot. And I will continue to do it. But one thing I probably recognized that when I wanted to be a part of a family, I knew that my consciousness, whatever the consciousness is, but whatever I was a part of me that I was a part of my partner with, was going to have to, I would have to learn a little bit more about myself to make sure that the the things I recognize inside of me, which were the nicer things, hopefully, I was going to now build a unit that was going to expand within what I thought was necessary, but at the same time, I had to grow with it. So my ego had to grow with the situation and not sit there as, like, simply put, as no, my ego is more important. I'm the top dog of this now expanding part of me. What I did was say, no, of course, I want to be the top dog. That's the ego working.
Yeah, of course.
But I can say, because I really worked hard on that, to put my own my own ego-ness to one side to a degree, and let it develop around the new egos that were a part of me. And that has been the most beautiful thing that I've experienced in all my life.
Wow.
It really is. But it is so hard, and there's a massive sacrifice to your own ego to try and pull that off, because now my ego goes, wow, you did it.
Yeah,
You
but
did it.
I imagine it particularly being hard to give space to the rising egos as well within this construct. And I imagine, and it's an assumption again, but I imagine the body was built to do just that. That at a certain age, especially as a male, your testosterone levels reduce, and that might allow you to be more dynamic, I guess, less rigid, more dynamic with your ego, potentially being influenced by your levels of testosterone and potentially being influenced by your levels of empathy, because you end up owning a lot of the responsibility or carrying the responsibility. And that is also another topic that I love. That is, as we were talking about ego, and it goes very much into self-development.
Yeah.
Responsibility forces you to develop to a certain degree, right? Okay, I love your reaction there, because
Yeah.
it is for the reflected human. The hope is that responsibility fosters reflection, thus also development. But you're right, it's not a
Not
requirement.
right. It's not
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
It's the right is it, or the way I see the right, although I hate all the words, but I've got to speak. The right for me was to have the choice, and
Understand, yeah.
the choice was, this is the path I chose, and it happened, although it had, and it continues to have, but in a different way now, which is nice. But it continued to have many challenges, many challenges. But ultimately, the choice I made, which was, no, I want, and this is a personal thing, and everyone has to do their own thing, but I want to always be the best I can be to the unit of the family, good or bad. But it was my recognition that if it was bad, that I took it on board as a responsibility to put my ego to one side sometimes, even when I didn't want to. I really didn't want to. When we sit there and think, no, this is right, da, 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 this is the way it's got to be. Sometimes, quite a bit, to be fair, a lot of times I've had to go, no, calm down, come on, now look at the bigger picture. And then all of a sudden, the bigger picture becomes, okay, no, this is going to be challenging. I've got to put that to one side a little bit. Think of these 3 children that are in my life now, and my partner, my wife, and just get on with it and learn and evolve from it. And I never forget my mother saying to me, bless her, when she was around, she always used to say, never react instantly, give yourself 48 hours.
Wise words, yeah.
Oh, it's amazing
Yeah,
wise
don't
words.
don't react out of the threat response, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Oh.
definitely. And I've carried that through, because then that allows you to have that chat with your ego, and just realize, oh shit, well, I won't swear, but what a prick I was. What was I thinking? What was I doing? Maybe and then you realize, well, no, you put yourself under that little bit too much pressure there, and that made you think that way. And that's what I wanted my children to see me go through. And at the same time, I shared almost all of those experiences when they were old enough, and talked them through those experiences. And
Mhm.
now they thankfully are at a younger age, now beginning to sort of recognize and you know, use that to their advantage. So that's what I'm proud of more than anything. Whether it's right or wrong, I don't know, but it seems to be working.
Do you? I mean, first of all, thank you very much for sharing. And
That's okay.
I'm just curious on the perspective, because you said you were optimizing or trying to find what would be best for, let's call it the family unit, right?
Like,
Do do you think there's actually people there that do have, let's say, negative intentions, right? And do you think, well, actually, I'm gonna self-sabotage, or I'm gonna do something that's maybe not the best for the unit? Or is it that most people are actually in the positive intention belief what I'm doing is the right thing, but ultimately maybe they're just, I'm the patriarch, I know because I've lived life, and you guys
absolutely.
need to follow me. You know, what do you think about this? I'm just curious.
I think that uh, that goes on, obviously. Um, I think that possibly we, from my personal experience in life, we we're born into an environment that we have no control over, and then we grow with that environment, and that environment then influences probably how we then intentionally go forward in life with those experiences deep inside. Now, I think that possibly we get to a stage that we can recognize that certain things have happened in our environment and upbringing that maybe didn't resonate very well for me. Okay. Or we don't. We don't address it. And that's not from no fault of anybody, whether it was a negative thing or a positive thing. People don't address it and they just become a product of their environment, and then they just replicate it through family, through reproduction, and then you hear these stories of, won't go into detail, of how people just become what their younger version experience was and become the opposite, but involved in it later. I think you know what I'm talking about, especially with abuse. Um, so for me personally, I don't know why, but when I was in my later teens, I started to ask myself questions of, I don't feel that my environment, I like it. Why? Why? And then for some reason, I've just gone on this journey of recognition, of trying to work out what I didn't like about it. And if I ever was in that situation going forward, family, was what would I do to not allow or not want my offspring to experience that I've experienced. So I did something about it, and
Mm.
hopefully I worked really hard to make that a positive experience with them. And a lot of people might turn and say, yeah, but how do you know that? And the reason why I know that is I didn't hide any of it from them.
Mm.
I talked with them. I spoke to them. I told them about the way I was brought up. I told them about things I didn't like. And I told them about the importance of never being alone, never to feel like once with a family unit, we all work as one to a degree. It's not perfect, but we all work as one. When there's things that we don't quite like, we need to share it, and we need to share it with the people that we love the most. And if that's encouraged, then that's a positive thing, and then hopefully, as their children, if that's a part of their unit, they will do the same, and hopefully we start to produce more loving experiences in the world, because we've been loved from day one,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
probably gone off on a
Absolutely.
tangent there, but it was, for me, it was self recognition of what can I do. I don't want to repeat this. I could feel myself doing it sometimes. I could feel the anger and that, no, it's really weird. But I just no, I don't want to be that person. I don't want my family to experience that. So I need to do something about it and share that as well. That's really important.
Having the courage to also share the hardships. And I think many, or I see actually, I observe many people having challenges to be open about these topics as well, right? And it is ultimately an individual quest for anyone to become a better version of themselves, and thus have the higher order, higher degree of impact towards whomever we wish to have an impact on, right? Be that work, be that family, be that whatever, wherever.
Yeah, there's no pure definition of, what I think is a good life could be
Absolutely.
so different to someone else's perspective, and recognizing that is even better, because if you recognize it, you're recognizing your own egotistical
Yep.
thoughts of how everyone else should be. Ego
And
again.
I do think that there is I think there's a cognitive bias currently in society, as people believe that this topic is a static one. I improved myself once, now I'm a better version, and that's it. Job's done. Now I can go back to whatever I was doing. It's fine. But it's actually a dynamic one. It's a continuous. It's like eating. You cannot just eat once and be done for a year. It's an ongoing thing, and I do believe that all the situations that we encounter, all of the different moments we have, all the positive, negative threat responses, all of these things lead us down into a different path, and continuous reflection about these topics as well.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the other biggest things that I recognize, this could be a little bit controversial, but I'll say it anyway, is that,
Please do.
yeah, is
That's what I
that,
want. Yeah.
yeah, no, for me personally, sometimes in my life, if I couldn't recognize the label of evilness, then how can I ascertain what good is? So from that, it sort of, I've got to be very careful with my words here.
Mm-hmm. And I won't judge you on your words. Don't worry.
That for me to be a better person, I need to recognize. Okay, it's like the yin and yang, the positive, the negative. If everything was so positive, then how do we know whether we're hurting someone else's feelings? If we can't recognize the reaction of what those possible circumstances of feelings through hurt represents, and we can't see it unless we can see it as it's represented in something. So to see it represented in something, normally at someone else's peril or horrible
Yeah.
experience, then I can't even appreciate that the simple things in life are good, you know. And I think we forget, especially in the Western world where news is fast, news is 24 hours. If you're lucky, news is 1 hour, 2 hours. But what's next? What's next? What's next? What's next? We can quite easily forget that there's a negative side to the positive. There's a positive side to the negative. There's a yin and there's a yang, and the importance of understanding that. That makes sense.
Absolutely. The thing is, I would like to challenge or potentially disagree with a part of it,
That's fine.
as I don't believe I can be responsible for other people's feelings. So I can send information, and I can make sure that this information is packaged in a way that allows the receiver to receive. But ultimately, how the receiver feels about this information does not necessarily lie within my responsibility, because potentially that the receiver might have his or her own traumas or topics or elements in the past that might have influenced them in that regard. The only thing that, and it's very stoic, the only thing I have control over is my emotions and the way that I package the information that I'm sending.
Sure.
And I believe, or I hope, maybe it's a hope, maybe it's a naive hope, that I can live at peace so long as I try the best I can do within the being, but also sending the information.
Yeah.
And if the person has a adverse effect and a negative emotion, or maybe it's even wrong to say negative or positive emotion, just has simply an emotion, right? Then that's it, and then this person might require some time to digest and think about how they would like to,
Yeah,
if even have an influence on that.
yeah, that makes sense. I probably put it across the wrong way. What I was probably trying to say was if I couldn't recognize, if my life was just rosy and dandy, then my life is rosy and dandy. But I don't believe it's meant to be always rosy and dandy, and I can't comprehend that my life is not always rosy and dandy if there isn't an opposite of life is shit and horrible. And the only way I can find out if life is shit and horrible to make me recognize that maybe my life is rosy and dandy is to actually observe someone else not in a very good position.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I meant.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mean it as in
Yeah.
I have influence over someone else's
Yep.
bad experiences. It's just observing that someone else can have a bad experience or what I perceive is a bad experience to make me recognize that my experience isn't that bad after all.
Thank you for clarifying and
Yeah,
or for reiterating on
yeah,
that.
yeah. Sorry.
And no, absolutely. That's what communication is about, right? It's and in all honesty, I think this skill is something that many lack, unfortunately. And this skill, in my opinion, develops you to becoming more humble and simply having a certain degree of thankfulness and gratitude. Right.
Gratitude,
and
gratitude
this
is
this
everything.
and this is kind of the like the bass line of a song. It's like the base of life.
Yeah,
If you approach life with the baseline of gratitude, I feel any song being played is amazing.
yeah.
Of course, it's not always good and bad. There are very aggressive songs, there's more melodic songs, there's more all types of songs, but it makes it worth living, in my opinion.
Oh, that's it's one of those like going back into that deeper, universal, falsy, spiritual thing. Um, it's what makes this place so unique. That well, maybe it's not unique. There's probably other places like it, but from my from my perspective, that's I love it. I absolutely love it. But lots of people may switch off when they hear me say that, and I appreciate that. And people might turn around and say, "Oh, you've got no idea. You haven't lived my life." Da, 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 da. I get that, and I would agree. I haven't lived your life. I haven't lived your life through the focus of your experiences and your vision and your hearing and your senses. I have not lived your life, but I've lived mine, and I can only reflect that in a way that in a humble type of way. If not, I'm feeding my ego and trying to perceive not that Andy isn't Andy. Andy's Andy, you know, and I could be whatever Andy I want to be, but I don't need to be. I can just be Andy, good and the
Mm.
bad.
The multiple Andys that coexist at the same time, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And not a mask,
Yeah.
and not also a role or a title or whatever most people perceive as
Label.
us as. Yeah, a label, exactly.
Total label.
Yeah.
You know, it's we're labelled from day one. Obviously, we're
Yeah.
given a name, but
True.
because I'm not Andy, really, in true reality, just known as Andy, because that's the name I was given. But before I was given the name, I existed.
Yeah.
It's
It's
fascinating.
it is. And have you ever been called a lot by your surname?
When I was at school, or
Okay.
in like that old fashioned, like
Yeah.
back in the day, I was always known as my surname.
Yeah.
Always.
Because
Even my
you know,
mates.
yeah. Because I'm half Swiss, half Brazilian, right? So I grew up in both continents, both countries, and I served in the Swiss Army. So when you are in the Swiss Army, you it's such an interesting experience, and I'm not here to judge it. I'm just here to share this one, and it's you literally get stripped off your identity, right? It's even called you get put on a uniform, right? To be uniform, right? As the word says it. And interestingly enough, the everything changes. The language changes, the clothes change, but also what's interesting and what this conversation just reminded me of is the name changes. Suddenly you are not your name, you're the rank and your surname. And it's so interesting how you have also developed a certain lens around being Andy, being this version of yourself tied to this name of yours, right? And I think that's so interesting is once you change it. And it makes me think of, how in Asian countries, usually, let's say, for instance, in Singapore, for the Hokkien or the Chinese community, they don't have Western names oftentimes.
Okay.
So they just choose a Western name. But oftentimes they're like after 2-3 months, and I had friends. I was living in Singapore for a while, and I had friends that were like, you know what? After 4 months, I prefer to be called by this name.
Wow.
So they would change name on I would say a quarterly or semesterly or like half year basis. And I just think that's so interesting. What must happen for you to change and adapt the name? And is it, and this is kind of the reflective question back, is it a big thing, this whole naming once you get married, who takes over which name, you know? And also kind of, is it tied to the ego as well or not? These type of things, it's somehow I love it. Yeah.
It's fascinating because I love your. I'd love to be. I wished I'd had more time in my life at a younger age to really reflect. But I wasn't. It wasn't meant to be. But that's wishing. I don't know why I say that. Wishing I've had a really good life. I think. But there's that thing about, actually, I'm just going to expand on that. When I say wishing, that sometimes that means that our ego's talking to saying you're regretting something. Well, and then I have to sit there and go, well, not really, not regretting anything. But that's dealing with the ego again. That took me off on a tangent. What was I going to say? What was you talking about?
The naming, different
Oh
names.
yes, yeah. I think it just goes to show how indoctrinated we are. Wherever we live in the world, there's rules, and we're born into the rule-based system, 100%. And that's from whether your parents or your guardian has names you something. It could be anything, and then you're known by that, and then at some point you can change it. But then if you want to do something like in my culture in the UK here, which is quite been the same in Europe, and most Western countries, probably most global countries, if you want to get married, this is what you have to do. If you want to, I don't know, buy a car. I mean, I can't believe buying a car now, the rigmarole you have to go through just to buy a car now. It's KYC on steroids. it's incredible, and I sit there and I think, oh, hold on a minute. Back in the 80s, I could go to a car dealership with a bunch of cash in my pocket to say I really like that car and buy it, and the guy or lady would go, okay, that's fine. Give us your money. The car's yours. There's your little certificate to say that that it's yours. But now it's just like God knows how many KYC proof of who you are, what you are, how you are. I'm amazed they didn't ask me what my beliefs were in. That's how intense it was just to buy a car, and we've just become this society of you are known as this, you are attached with a number, and you can't really live your life without either. Which you can, obviously, but that's how far we've gone. But what I find fascinating, going off at a tangent there, is how people are waking up to this. What? Why? Why do we need all this? Why can't it's just there's a bit more of a simplicity around how we can go about buying things, providing services. It's just gone too complicated now. And even if obviously your experience of going in the Swiss Army, you have to go through this well, you're not known as this anymore. You're known as this. You're known as this. And I probably get the philosophy behind it, but or the psychology behind it, but it's just everything's so regulated into an ID of you, and not a lot of people recognize the ID as Andy. But I'm not Andy. I'm this person just
Well,
talking. It's weird.
I mean,
It's good.
I mean, on the one hand side, I think on an individual level, I would prefer to start with that and then move up to the macro. But on an individual level,
Yeah.
I think people want to create labels, let's call them. I prefer to call them boxes, but let's call them labels.
Yeah.
And they wish to be able to empathize. So Andy and Ivan would empathize by, let's say, Ivan finding out common denominators or common rule-based systems that we have in place. So I would say one of the biggest rule-based systems that we have in place would be culture, as an example, right?
Sure.
So I'm assuming now, but we are both living in the Western part of Europe, right? So and I think it's the wish of the individual to empathize and feel safe and not feel that the person, especially physically in front of me, is a threat. That's why I wish to establish a certain level of safety by understanding, does this human being have a similar understanding of similar rule-based systems, and thus I create labels where I can create common denominators. And okay, it's safe, I can talk, or it's safe, I don't need to go into a threat response, right?
Yeah.
And I think we are so programmed into that, right? If you travel, right? My girlfriend and I were recently traveling through Thailand on holidays, and we were at this, let's say, nice place, and it was so interesting as there were people from all over the world, and we started playing a volleyball there at the beach, and people joined in, and we had no ways of communicating really well, and it was such an interesting and fun activity, and the common denominator that allowed for the safety to flourish is that we are all in this closed resort type system, so we feel safe. And funnily enough, we had on one side of the part, we had a gentleman from Ukraine. On the other side, in my team, we had a gentleman from Russia. And it was so interesting that everybody got along, So suddenly you only had this rule-based system, which was, we're here in a safe space, and this allows us to flourish. And it became a super cool interactive moment. Whereas, and I think that's beautiful to see. And I think why these things have been pushed by the larger institutions, countries, you name it, I think it's an attempt to create order, to move away from chaos, to right. It's always this freedom, but if you make everyone fully free, then you make no one free as well. So it's kind of like striking the balance. How much freedom do you give versus how much do you suppress?
Yeah.
You know, can I just listen to loud music at 3 o'clock in the morning? And, you know, as an example, that would be a freedom, but then I'm suppressing other people's needs as well that might want to work tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I recently had such an interesting conversation during a conference with this one gentleman, and he mentioned that because countries have become so big, and because once you are at a certain level within an organization, you need to disassociate from reality, and you need to disassociate from, I have 10,000 employees, I have 10,000 numbers, basically. And that's kind of the only way that you get to make decisions, because you might have 1,000 Andys and 1,000 Sarahs in there, as an example. And his belief is that countries are too big. So we should stick to the size of the community that we can manage. I think the number is around 150 people-ish, if I recall correctly, that we biologically can manage to maintain in a social contact and remember as well. And we should basically divide the population of the world by this number of 150, and that would be the number of countries that should exist.
Okay.
And that was such an interesting thought experiment that this gentleman created in my mind when we would discuss this topic.
Oh, what was the basis of that, though? What was the theory that
the theory? It's a great question. The theory is that this gentleman was of the belief that ultimately this leads to the strengthening of dominance hierarchies and extremely hierarchical structures, the way that we have it in today's world.
Okay.
You know, where potentially, you know, you guys sometimes talk about cults, but I would say that a certain amount of organizations might set the narrative for their dominant hierarchy or dominant structures, and that kind of locks the 90% into a way of living. Right? Kind of that's where his arguments were coming from.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm trying to imagine it in my mind as you're talking it through. I kind of, yeah, I suppose the way I'd look at that is, can I manage a family of 10, or do I want a family of 1,000? Well, if I had a family of 10, I could possibly go very grey quite quickly if I wanted to be the type of dad that I've been with the family of 3. Okay, because the demand would be put a lot more on me. But that's because, but if I had a family of 1,000, I couldn't do it. So I'd have to be something else. And that's, well, these are the rules. Then we'll have some captains, we'll have some lieutenants, we'll sit with the captains, I'll sit with the captains, this is what's got to happen, pass it down the line, and then once a month they all get back, all the issues get passed up the line, then I meet with the captains again, and they tell me the problems, and then I go, okay, these are the solutions. And I get what you mean now. Yeah, definitely.
And you know, thinking about what you talked, I think it was last week with Camel. Let's assume that this situation does come into play, that an higher intellect or extraterrestrials arrive.
Yeah.
And this becomes the dominant narrative to create, let's say, this unification of the world into one country world, perhaps. That would be then the absolute opposite, right? Into the maximum of a potential creation of a dominance hierarchy then.
Yeah. Scary.
Perhaps. Do you think, okay, I'm just curious on your opinion. And I have my own thoughts on it.
What
But do
with
you
the alien thing?
no, a question that I wish to ask.
Okay.
Do you think people get corrupted, or do you think they are inherently corrupt?
Wow. Such a deep question, isn't it?
And there isn't a right or a wrong.
Okay.
I do have my assumptions, and I'll share them afterwards as well.
Okay. We might have to continue this another time. So I normally run these till about 10 o'clock, because that's like 3 hours.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But like what I've learned to do is I need to understand your interpretation of what you mean by corruption
Mhm. Maybe I'll give you
or
an
corrupt
example.
or
Yeah.
corrupt.
Yeah. So I was talking to a senior manager of a large organization, and he told me he had to leave the organization, to quit, because it was so, the culture was forcing greed, forcing, let's call him to do deeds that he believed to be evil. Let's call it like that. And I don't want to name any names.
Sure, that's fine.
Such that he was being corrupted in the process and actually turning to the thing that he did not wish to become.
Okay.
So, thus, by changing the environment, he allowed himself to escape this and become the version that he wanted to be. But he would not have been able to be the non-evil version of himself within that system, because the system would basically strip him of that part and it would make him go evil. Even if he doesn't want to, it would make him go evil according to him in that specific case. So I ask myself, if you are being put into some of these positions within dominance hierarchies at the very top, even if you have good intentions, even if you were a good-natured spirit person, does the system change you and force you to sometimes develop into something that you would not want to become? Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah. I get that. Okay, personal opinion, because I have witnessed that at certain stages of my life. And I've always been fortunate enough to be able to recognize that ultimately I've got a choice. And that choice will be depicted on how I want my life to go forward. Now, if I choose to, say for argument's sake, it was in a corporate environment similar to the person you talked to, and that was me. If I could not see any other way, and I wanted to use I would evaluate what I was getting from being in that corporate environment, to if that was serving a purpose for my outside corporate life, for my family, whatever. If that was serving me, then I would have to make a choice. Do I want that? Do I not? And how does it sit inside of me? And how does that have a bigger effect on everyone that's relying on me for whatever? So I can't really answer it in a roundabout way, but I do believe that most of us are born neutral. maybe if we go, if you're into the spiritual side of things and maybe believing we come back to learn something, but then maybe we do bring something within us. But in the human experience, it either wakes up while you're here or it doesn't. So putting that to one side, then I presume that in theory we're born neutral, and then from that neutrality, our environment, then we become that environment, like I was talking about earlier. And from there, we become our environment and live our life, the rest of our lives being influenced by our experiences from that environment. So we can become corrupt if we want to be corrupt, if that's going to use that word in that way. Or we do the complete opposite, which I've had to do. I've had to make some tough decisions where I thought, no, this isn't right. But I haven't just on a whim just gone, no, that's not for me. But then maybe I haven't experienced the severity of whatever corruption could be, which may make me feel like I've had to make a quicker decision. But I'm a firm believer in what my mum says, don't react. If you want to react,
Yeah.
you might make that one decision. And if you've done your job properly, hopefully, and you can communicate fairly with your family environment at that unjudgmental phase, within that group, then you can 9 times out of 10 get yourself out of situations that you're not comfortable with.
Yeah.
But
Thank you. I love no,
sorry.
I love the thought behind it, and the belief, I would say, that there's an active choice.
Yeah, I
Right.
think if we haven't got a choice, then it's like good old Neo in the Matrix, isn't it?
Yeah,
Why
that's
this?
true.
Why he drove Smith insane, and he just used to say, "Why, Mr. Anderson? Why?" He said, "Because I choose to." It's so powerful, though.
Yeah,
It's powerful.
and
That's
and
got yin and yang, because some people can
yeah.
choose to do the right things, wrong things, whatever we depict is right and wrong. Sorry.
And because I know you want to close the session, and that's why on my side, you said before, wishing is tied to regret, or you at least perceive it to be as such.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Maybe I believe, or I wish for it to be different. But I do wish that people would live less on autopilot, more on active, let's call it active pilot.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's what this podcast will hopefully, like others do, instigate thought. That's all I want. That's all I ever want. I want to share thoughts, keep it a safe space for people to bring their own opinions, and hopefully people that observe what we talk about may instigate something in their lives that hopefully improves it. Who knows? That's what I find exciting. That's what I've really sort of gets me going on doing this, really. And I've never spoken to you in my whole life, and I've just had probably the most lovely conversation with a complete stranger, which I don't feel like is a stranger, because it's almost like that soul level conversation, which is what it should be about. It's what it should be about. Nothing more,
And
nothing less.
you know, um, I've had multiple conversations with like this with many humans, and recently, I think 2, 3 men that I've had conversations like this, we were talking in a similar level, and they told me it's so nice to be able to talk like that to another man. And I often feel that perhaps we are able to do this because we know that we can leave the ego on the side. And it's not about who has more, who has done what, and all of these things that people try to measure up to each other. And I think that's that's an absolute thing that I think, as you said it correctly, creating the safe space such that it invites more people that are able to put their egos aside and just have this open mindset. And I love the word instigate thought,
Yeah.
right? Or catalyze thought. That's amazing, and it's a wonderful vision of yours. And
Yeah,
I'm happy to contribute in
dude,
my way, shape, or form. And
I want loads of conversation with you because it's so interesting, and I don't even think we've touched half of maybe where we can go with conversation. And I think Camel would really enjoy this as well. He'd find it. He'd find. Well, I think everyone would. To be
we're
fair, everyone
we're
that
not.
comes on.
You know what's the beauty? We're not in a rush. You know.
Exactly.
So it's a wonderful pub chat, and I'm very much looking forward to the next time we have a pub chat together again.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Right?
Be great. It'd be great if you can join us next week if you can, but if you can't, that's fine.
Next
There'll be
week,
another one. There'll be another one. There'll be another one.
next week, family obligations, but gladly thereafter
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
future.
Exactly.
Very
It's
happy.
and Ivan, what we'll say is thank you very much for supporting the channel because
Absolutely.
that's really important. And I can't thank you enough for actually coming on because that has an effect on people, giving other people confidence to come on. And I rely on that totally, and it's amazing. I normally finish these, and I just look at a picture of whatever, and I just look and I just think, wow, I can't believe this. This is actually working. So this channel's for you guys, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you say that because it's very empowering, of course, to anyone listening.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm not sure how many people will still be here towards the end because it's
I
probably
don't
what
know.
3 hours now.
Yeah,
But
you'll be surprised.
nonetheless, I'm also asking myself a little bit because mostly when I'm in innovation, I also think about scale, and I'm super curious how in the future, considering all things and hoping for the best, how you'd approach this topic to still be able to create safe space and a certain level of, let's call it, soulful discussion at scale.
I don't know. I think that's part of growth, and I may have to make decisions that I may not see in the same light today. But I have thought about that to be fair. But let's because I thought about it, it's not going to be a surprise one way or the other. If it becomes at scale and I need to scale it up and more people want to get involved, then I'm going to have to talk to the people that are involved, which is not just me, and we'll have to have that discussion and see how we can see how we can be innovative to make it work at scale. If there might not be a possible way, but I don't know. I'm sure there will be. Love it. We'll see. The universe. I don't know. I don't even know if I'll wake up tomorrow. I
Yeah,
haven't, to be honest.
absolutely.
So I don't worry about it. The thing for me is obviously getting into ego. It's feeding my ego. It's achieving something that I've always wanted to do, and that's bring people together and give people the opportunity to just talk, especially in today's age.
Can I just, I know we're closing the session, but can I just
Yeah, sure.
ask you a last question,
Of course you
if I
can.
may? So, for instance, there was a moment today where you opened up also about the upbringing of your children, as an example,
Sure.
right? Would you now actually invite your children to listen to that part? Would that be something you would do?
My oldest son actually listens to these,
Okay, cool.
and my daughter was on 2 weeks ago.
Okay,
No, 3 weeks
cool,
ago. Sorry, three
cool,
episodes ago. My daughter jumped on and she was listening, and she actually got involved. It was quite cool.
cool, cool.
Yeah.
It was just a curiosity. I'm
Oh man,
infinitely
yeah.
curious about these things. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Again, this might sound like, I don't know. I don't want to sound like I'm special or anything, but I'm going to just say it as it is because I've got nothing to hide. And if my kids listen to it, they go, "Yeah, that's right, Dad. That's the way it is."
That's Andy,
Yeah, exactly. That's Dad.
That's
It's
just
the
Andy.
dad being Dad. Um, but 100%, I don't hide anything from them. Um, and we have open conversations if they want to then have open conversations. My eldest boy, him and some of his mates listen to these podcasts, which is I find really cool. I can't believe that they do, but they do. But that says something. And he will talk about it, but then the types of conversations I have, maybe not as quite as in depth, I'm having them with my kids anyway. There's nothing new. I might go a little bit more deeper on certain subjects, but that's because they're not quite interested in that. But as a rule, the way I like to think, talk, learn, listen, big key thing that my mum always used to say, learn to listen more than talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is, again, that's a real test of my ego because we have a tendency to talk a little bit too much sometimes, or well, I do anyway. Yeah, I don't hide anything. My kids, they can be involved. They can come on. I'd love my youngest boy to come on. He loves his investing, and I know a lot of people like to listen to that sort of talk. I hope to get him on one day because he's really young, but he's really into that side of things. Thinks really.
Investing, trading,
No,
this
investing.
time frame, if I
Totally.
may ask.
Yeah, it
Investing.
doesn't trade. No,
Okay. Okay.
he'd probably make a really good trader, but who knows? He's very happy doing what he's doing and investing into similar innovative, disruptive, innovative innovation that I'm into as well. So it's a great bond with us both because we talk about the same sort of things. And the added bonus, Ivan, I get it from a 23-year-old's perspective.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
that's changed well, that has really changed and added to my confidence of seeing life through a younger person's point of view, and from an investment point of view,
And
especially with innovation and whatever. It's been a massive help.
and that keeps your mind fresh and young as well. It's I think it's the probably the potentially one of the healthiest things to have, let's call them friends or acquaintances or contacts with people that are within their early 20s
Yep.
or even 20s in a professional environment to get
Yep.
to kind of keep fresh on that
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. I love it. I love being a dad. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, it's been really hard.
Well,
At certain stages, it's been horrendous. But
I can imagine.
yeah, yeah. If there's one thing I will say to anyone, if yeah, it's not an easy thing, but it's the most loving thing.
Oh,
So it's if you want the ultimate in that love bond relationship with some little beings in your life, it's the ultimate, but it's bloody hard work, but very rewarding, very rewarding
yeah. Uh,
indeed.
would you say it's the type of thing one could not understand without experiencing it?
Um, okay, that's a really good question, and I want to answer it as I was quite fortunate to be around some very good friends when I was very young that had children very young. I was a little bit later on in my life in comparison. And because they were very good friends of mine and we were socializing with them, I grew up with that almost grandfather type thing with them. I could enjoy them and give them back. but also I could see the pros and cons, the good times, the bad times, the you know, all that sort of stuff. So I sort of experienced it, but not 24/7.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a good leader for me. What I could never replace or even try to understand was, if you're this type of person, obviously, the bond from day one, that all of a sudden that creative soul that you're holding in your arms, if you're fortunate enough to watch the birth of your children, which I have all three of mine, once you go through that experience as a father, which is nothing like the mother, I can assure you, but it's still an experience. But it's an amazing thing to witness. And then when you see that creation put in your arms, the instant you get, for me personally, can't talk for anyone else, was a bond that I could not replicate unless it was mine, and experience that. And that is just mind blowing.
May I just ask a nuanced question in detail in that?
Of course.
Did you have the bond, as you described it, at day one, which I presume you claim to be birth? Or did you already start to build a bond while they were still in the womb?
Okay, that's a great question. Really great question. The bond was physical, which instigated an emotional inner bond. So it was, for me, it was that physicality of, oh my God, I've held my, well, my son. I had boy, girl, boy, but the very first one, I held my son. I couldn't hold him before because he was inside mum. So I couldn't have that physical. I'm a very sort of free touchy. Some people will probably go, "What, you pervert?" No, I don't mean it like that. I'm a
Like a
very,
love language, probably,
yeah,
as
exactly.
yeah, touch being the love language, probably.
It's just amazing. It was just wow. Oh, especially as you've just experienced the whole process as well, which is mind blowing. And then to hold my son, and then my daughter, then my son, was just three experiences that were just so special, and they touched my heart. Not about, don't get me wrong, I'm a big man's man, and I've done some really weird stuff during my man's man life, but I don't mind saying things like that. It touched my heart like it does most people. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Born out of love, best thing ever. Created out of love, born out of love.
You know, in that regard, it might sound weird what I'm about to say, but it's always kind of a bit of a mind experiment.
That's cool.
It would be interesting to, I mean, right, biologically a male, but it would be so interesting to experience giving birth, you know, and then also to the point where you have this bond and then you feed your child with your own biological product, right? We're so rational,
The
that
ultimate.
sounds insane, right? That's so interesting.
It's the ultimate. It's you know, obviously I couldn't do that, but I don't know. It's just I don't know. From day one, it would, you know, all my children were born out of love. They were created out of love and born out of love, and that's just been the measure. I've always said love is king. There's been times where I haven't thought that, but it's always been the basis of the family unit. It's powerful stuff, dude. Powerful
Yeah,
stuff. Absolutely
beautiful.
powerful. It is beautiful. It is beautiful. But that does, you know, some people go, "Oh, what are you talking about?" And that doesn't mean to say I will fight anyone on the corner for the protection of my family. I can be a man's man, and I've done shit that I'm really not proud of in my past. But I love being a man's man, and I love talking man's men talk, but I also like being a human being just as much. And I think to share true feeling,
I think there's a
what
general
humans all about.
misconception.
Yeah,
I think there's a
absolutely.
general misconception that a man's man cannot be vulnerable. I actually think it's the opposite.
Absolutely.
I think you need the courage to be vulnerable, and that's exactly what makes you a man if you're able to stand up, talk directly, say what you think, what you believe in, what you feel. And if that's what takes courage, and that to me is much more being a man's man than not having the courage to do so.
Yeah. Probably said that from. I've been around for 60 years.
Yeah, I
From
know,
a
different
really
type of
old school
context,
type way.
of
Yeah,
course, of
old school
course.
type way. It is. Yeah, you're totally right. Because if you can just be you, whatever that is, makes you more powerful than most people. And I don't mean that in a nasty power way.
Yeah.
It just means you'll be so much more
Uh,
open to opportunity and observance of anything. Hang on 1 second, please.
yeah, you mean it in a potential way,
Absolutely,
in
yeah.
allowing the potential to unfold.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Well, Ivan, thank you so much, dude. I want more of these conversations.
Equally,
Be
thank
interested
you
to
as
see if
well.
what the audience think of it all. But I think we'd be surprised. I'm always surprised. I'm always surprised when I read some of the comments sometimes, and I just think, wow, people like this sort of stuff, because it's open and it's honest and there's no bullshit involved. Well, there might be, I suppose, but hopefully there isn't. Just open chat. So I've really enjoyed this one, mate. Can't thank you enough. Really can't. It's you make the content,
Yeah.
guys. Come on, you make the content.
And I wanted to thank you, and I wanted to tell you that next time I should also probably be able to join with the camera as well in the
Oh,
future.
that's entirely up to you, obviously. But
I agree. Yet I do believe there is a certain level of information that I was able to read through your body language. It's kind of sensing resonance. Oftentimes it's a lot about, is it resonating, and maybe even am I understanding what you're saying or the other way around, right? And I think it just helps.
I
Right.
can't hide my reaction.
Oh, exactly.
Well, I can
Exactly.
if I
Well,
want to, but not
yeah,
over 3 hours.
but I mean, if it would be sad if we would choose to spend our Sunday night in a place where we have to wear a mask, right?
Exactly.
So I wish to live mask free wherever I am, and
Good
if
for you.
that's in the digital world or the physical world.
Good for you. And we'll explore other subjects as well. I
Very
will
gladly.
ask you loads of questions. So.
Very
Can't wait.
gladly.
Can't wait. Thank you, dude. Thank you very much for coming on.
You too.
Absolute pleasure. I feel very honored. Indeed.
Have a lovely evening. Enjoy your Christmas, as next Sunday I won't be around.
Yeah.
And then see you in the future.
Yeah, definitely. You take good care. Thank you very much for your support. See you
Gladly.
soon. Cheers.
Take care. Have a
Bye
nice
then.
evening.
Bye
Bye.
then. Bye bye. Bye bye.